to turn back. I look inside myself and see my heart is black. No colors anymore, I want them to turn black.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to Earth Chronicles. I hope you're getting the feeling that this is going to be a good one. We are going down a very particular controversial rabbit hole that needs to be gone down. And we are looking at ancient cults. Josh and I have been looking at this for a long time. And my guest today, our guest today, has been looking at this for decades, since before I was even born. And of course, we're talking about the great Michael Tsarion. He's a good friend and colleague of mine, a hero really in this field of carving new ground, looking at things from different perspectives, going down the rabbit holes that everybody's afraid to go down, bringing up research that literally nobody else is looking at. And today we're going to be focusing in on the ancient cults, the ancient priestess cults, the witch cults, the elite female branch of this global cabal that we call the Illuminati, the deep state. It's got a million names. But when you get into someone like Michael, for those that are new to his research, he's the kind of guy that gives you not just a bunch of vague descriptions of things. He's going to give you the names, dates, addresses of all the different aspects of this. And, just an excellent chronicler of this type of obscure research. So, of course, if you don't know about Michael's work, you have to go check him out at michaeltsarion.com. I have posted the links in the chat there on Rumble. You can check it out. And he's a man of many talents. He does a lot of different work and different subjects. And so he's basically separated the subjects out onto various websites so that you can find it easier. So if you want, you can also go check out his work on this particular thesis we're going to be talking about today. And you can get it at femaleilluminati.com. I've also posted that link. And so definitely go and check it out. And then to get a greater archive of in-depth research into this and many other topics, Michael and I started a project in 2016, right before Trump was elected. It's called Unslaved. It's a premium investigative mystery school that has thousands of hours of a archive of a museum of information that you're never going to see anywhere else. It's very unique, and you're going to love it. So, but before we bring on the guest, Josh, I just want to say hello. Let you say a few words to open this. You've been deep down this, so welcome, man. Good to see you.
Well, this guest that we have coming on for everybody out there, I've spent 2.5 decades researching these topics. And one of the main reasons for the research deep into the occult was because of this man here. So I had read, I've been in the Jordan Maxwell, I've been in Bill Cooper, and then, David Icke. And then I discovered Michael Tsarion, and that's where the rabbit hole really began, because he started answering a lot of these questions proposed by these other researchers who were just kind of giving a description of the evil or why the evil was coming or what the cult was or where they came from, where Michael deep dives into the origins of a lot of these things. And I mean, you guys are in for a really good show today. And just a fair warning as well. And I want to put this fair warning out there that just remember that this is information. And never believe anything anybody says. You can go out there and research it yourself. And this is one of the most important things is we have to go out there and research these cells. So I urge everybody to take what Michael says and go out there and study it and research it yourself. Okay. Before yelling and screaming or whatever it might be, because there's going to be a lot of things that potentially he says that are going to shock people and their narrative and their beliefs. But that's okay, because you know what? This is how we grow spiritually, individually, and as humanity. And a lot of the stuff that Michael has said is, it's going to blow your mind. I'm telling you, a lot of these connections that he's going to make are things that you've never even thought of, or that this information even existed. And so I'm incredibly excited. This is like, for me, this is meeting a legend. So I'm excited. Let's get it going.
Let's get it go. Really good. And yeah, absolutely, guys. Yeah, follow up on the threads. And one thing I like about working with Michael is he documents his research in a way that I honestly don't see out there anymore. It's just loaded with source material. So go down, check it out. This is going to be phenomenal. I'm very excited about this. Before we rock, though, I just want to thank the sponsors of this network who make this possible. Just want to let you guys know we got a special deal with Mike Lindell right now. You can go to mypillow.com, use the code Badlands, and right now he's got a spring sale going on all kinds of great stuff. You can go save anywhere from 40% all the way up to 80%. He's got slippers, sheets, pillows. Make sure you have a comfy sleep. And he's a major sponsor of this network, and he's also a patriot. So thanks to Mike Lindell for continuing to support. And you know what? I also want to say a quick thank you to Benson Honey Farms. Let me just play a quick reel. Guys, this is a family-owned, patriot-owned company, unpasteurized, raw honey. Don't go buy that fake syrup stuff. Go to the source. And let's hear from Benson Honey Farms.
Benson Honey Farms delivers raw honey straight from the hive to your table. It is their mission to provide you the best raw honey at the lowest prices possible. By not pasteurizing, overheating, or filtering their honey, Benson Honey Farms ensures that all of its natural pollen and enzymes stay in the honey for maximum health benefits. So cut out the middleman and go straight to the source. Visit BensonHoneyFarms.com and use the rep code Badlands to place your order today. That's BensonHoneyFarms.com, rep code Badlands.
All right, let's do this. I'm going to go ahead and bring him in.
All right.
And there he is. Michael, so good to see you. Always a pleasure. I'm still reeling from the show we just recorded yesterday with Scott on Unslaved. We just posted that for members of Unslaved. Go check that out. But thank you so much for joining me, Michael. I know you're very busy, but welcome to Earth Chronicles, my friend.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. And thanks for that intro, Josh. It's
Yeah.
most appreciated. Thanks. It's great to be on.
Absolutely. Well, I wanted to, when I thought about what's the first question to ask, how do we get this conversation started? I figured maybe we should start a little bit about yourself, Michael. There's a lot of people that maybe remember vague videos going around a while back about you. Maybe they didn't follow up. Maybe people have never come across your work. Maybe just give a little sketch about what got you started in researching any of these conspiratorial, historical, psychological, all the subjects that we talk about. And then we can get into what led to this particular thesis of a female Illuminati. So let's just start with your background a little bit.
Well, that started back in probably about somewhere within 79 to 82 was a crucial period, because 2 or 3 subjects that if I hadn't have found those, probably nothing would have happened as it did. And the first one, the way I like to normally order it, is at first it was about subliminal advertising in advertising in the media. That became a sort of a spontaneous focus, not planned. Nothing before in my life would have ever oriented me to be into that. but it opened a lot of doors, and that took me into rock album covers and pop art in general, media and advertising. So that was key. And very early on, because others have written about that quite well, but they never ever address the occult aspect of the hidden persuaders or Madison Avenue. That's all left out. So I found a niche then. Now remember, I'm only 14, 15 at the time, so this is not planned to go anywhere. It's just a personal study, as everything I've done is. Then around about the same time came, because I was living in America at the time, there was a kind of a culture shock that I had. And therefore, as other people who've had culture shock can testify, there's a kind of a looking back at your homeland with a different kind of nostalgia and a more interest, basically. So then I ran around, getting books on Ireland. I mean, just come out of the place. This is the war-torn troubles of Belfast, But because of culture shock, I started to become more interested in, say, the ancient history of Ireland, and this was facilitated by the great Jim Fitzpatrick, whose books I had just become aware of in the months, literally weeks leading up to leaving Ireland, and they were in my mind, these beautiful color books by the great artist Jim Fitzpatrick, who is Irish himself, right? So I was carrying this, and then just got more and more interested in the history of my own land. Again, nothing prior. In fact, quite the contrary. You would think that I'd be, if determinism is a fact, then you'd think that I'd be determined to never want to look back and then just enjoy the jacuzzis and the beaches and the Disney, all of the different extravaganzas of America, and never could be concerned with my homeland. And yet I was deeply into the music and deeply, more deeply. It's like, they say, you move away from the mountain and you can see it properly and you become quite nostalgic. So my journey opened then. And this is about 10 years before any sort of access to the so-called conspiracy movement. Wasn't reading anything like that. So that was the beginning. And, there was a slight interest in the tarot and astrology, nothing big, because my family was deeply into these things. And so that made me sort of apprehensive. So a lot of things that I could have studied, I didn't, because of this proximity to the New Age movement, which really, to tell you the truth, pretty much repulsed me from day one. With a few exceptions, it basically repulsed me. This legion of family friends and going to one ashram after the other and being exposed to everything that was in the early days of the New Age movement really didn't do anything for me. I kept seeing nothing but insincerity and affluence gone wrong, and a mishmash of hybridized knowledge that didn't really, have any. I was far more interested in, and the third thing would have been etymology, because I ran into one of the family associates and friends was the great artist David Singer. But David Singer was a lot more than, the David Singer that's known to the art community. He's an absolute master sacred geometrist and expert in etymology of the old world. And he had a massive influence. He's the one who introduced me to Gerald Massey. And oh my God, the doors had opened up just from that, both from the sacred geometry aspect, aesthetics, and then the etymology. These became deep loves. I lived in dictionaries. Just, the dictionary was it for me. And so that would have been the third thing. All again, between, 80 and 82. And so all that's ever happened since is an embellishment and a sort of a deeper research in, say those three areas. And then maybe, you could symbolism, secret society symbolism, tracing, or ancient history. So these are all, and then finally 10 years later, when I returned to America about 91, I got exposed to the actual conspiracy movement. The people like Ralph Epperson and Geo Griffin and Eustace Mullins particularly, and on and on and on it goes. So that was more of a hardcore focus now, although it still wasn't really that focused, but at least I was aware of this movement in America, which was life-saving, because otherwise it would have been a very fragmented and frayed type of existence, on the return in the night, given what was happening in America at the time. But this was good to find this undercurrent of well-meaning patriots. Reverend Jack Moore, almost all were from the Christian background. We know their names. Excellent researchers, particularly Ralph Epperson, but there was plenty more, people out there that I get into. Stan Monteith, we all know how brilliant his work is, Well, absolutely eye-opening. And it just, this was the period of Desert Storm. Don't forget. So Nord Davis, I hope people remember Nord Davis, Christian writer, and on it goes with the list. And I just devoured that. Oh, it's unbelievable. I just devoured all of that Patriot work and tried to get as many videos on it and books as I could. And so I would say that was the fourth. No, it was a second phase in my life where deep dives into some very, very esoteric material, controversial, deeply controversial, began then more in earnest. The stuff I was into in the 80s, I didn't know. I didn't even know how to spell the word controversial or think of it as controversial. It was just interesting and a little dark and sinister and everything, especially the subliminal content and the idea of a hidden persuaders. But that was quickly proven to me. And even actors like Lee Majors and Robert Mitchum and, Peter Falk. There's a whole line of people who'd already, the movie Looker, think about that. Many other, the movie Network, my God, right? Albert Finney. So this had leaked out slightly. It wasn't as controversial, Brian Wilson Keyes, Gene Kilbourne, Douglas Rushkoff, were all touching on this. Not the occult stuff, but the fact that there was a malicious hand at work manipulating the mind. This is the old Edward Bernays school, right? So, but I didn't personally think of it as being anything overly, weird or anything like that. But when I get into the deep conspiracy movement of these great thinkers in America, which you don't have in Europe, you got it later, but it's America first and foremost paved the way in this, absolutely. Then you knew you were onto the trail of a predator, and it was bloody serious. This was not just pastime study and something to do on a rainy day. This was very life-changing and serious.
Yeah, wow, what a good summary there. Josh, did you have any sort of opening questions or way to kind of dive into this? You and I did a series. We got into ancient serpent cults. Remember those? We've spoken about on this show. We've talked a lot about what a lot people are starting to become more aware of is some of these more predatory and sinister networks like the Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, people got into Pizzagate, these kinds of things. So they're getting little bits of this. Maybe give me your little summary, Josh, on some of this and how we can get opened into where Michael can take this.
Well, yeah, I think it's important to see one part of this is that there's a whole hidden world of information, of knowledge and control that is operating behind the scenes. And when you start to uncover it, the first thing that you're going to get is that surface level of coverage. And most people hear the Illuminati or whatever this might be, the cabal. But the thing is this goes deeper and darker than you could ever imagine. One place I'd actually like to start with, Michael, is the House of Garcenia. And kind of how this is a controlling factor of this female bloodline that has been passed on for hundreds and hundreds of years all throughout the European monarchs. And that the European monarchs, we want to think that are controlled by the male bloodline, but in actuality, it's the female bloodline that is being replicated throughout the royal lineage.
Right. Yeah, that line is a matriarchal line. These matriarchal lines are being sort of scrubbed from the history books, even by genealogists and even by historians that track royal dynasties. Because you're right, it's very dark and deep, but these are people who have ultimate control. So in the subject of genealogy, these matriarchal lines are only traced to about 100 or 200 years ago, whereas the male lines can go back 1,000 years. Well, wait a minute. The Jews have their matrifocal, right, the descendant from the female, and those go back hundreds of years. But when you track European aristocrats, it only goes back 100 or 200 years. Well, this is nonsense. And then even the genealogists who now do know about these maternal matriarchal lines, they're really matrilineal would be a better word. the ones who accept, like this House of Garcindia, for an example, they only are managing to take it back 800 years. That's pulling teeth to get them to do that. But wait a minute. As Ralph Ellis and other these people show, this House of Garcinda didn't just start 800 years ago, because everything has antecedents. But the genealogists don't want to even go there, because that would then change the face of what we know about the Christian world and the Jewish world, because that takes you to the House of Parthia and the Redheads, and that, who still exist, by the way, but that would be one way to track it. And that then, if you go to Parthia, well, then you have to go to Egypt. And if you go to Egypt, you talked about Epstein, that castle that he had, that place. Why does that have Jewish colors and also is shaped as a Islamic design? We need to probably, talk about that later, if you can remind me, because it ties in to what we're going to talk about. But the point being that from Parthia, it actually goes back to the ancient Atnists of Egypt, that line. So of course we're only going to take it to 500 or 800. You couldn't possibly go before that into prehistory. That's the cutoff point. But that's where I start. That's where you need to start, because this thing gets so damn, Catherine, think of the three greatest female monarchs. Queen Victoria, and her mother was also called Victoria. Where the hell did they come from, right? Catherine the Great of Russia, recognized as one of the greatest female monarchs that ever existed, and throw in there Queen Christina, who was an open occultist, and she hired John Dee and Edward Kelly to come to Sweden, and on their way, they just happened to stop off in Czechoslovakia and design Prague as a side project, as they were advising Queen Christina, and they were on her ticket. They were on her finances, right? Edward Kelly, the great occultist from England. She had a university where she gathered all of these people and was herself one of the top occultists of the world. All three of those monarchs, female, are linked to this House of Garcinda, just as, again, to extend that point. So was the two Holy Roman emperors. So is the House of Habsburg, Esterhazy, these Juan Carloses of Spain, the Bourbons, the Stuarts of Scotland, and on I could go with the lines. There is not a male monarch that doesn't have. In fact, there's the experts on this who've revealed this have to now admit that almost every major event that happened in Europe at the time of a monarch, that monarch was related directly to this House of Garcindia, which is matrilineal. Then when you study it further, you find out that any matrilineal line, especially these ones of royalty that we're talking about, to them, the patriarchal line is a piece of worthless shit. So their husbands and their sons, should they actually continue a dynasty, meaning, a king has more sons than he has daughters, to this matriarchal line, that's a lot of nonsense. That doesn't even qualify history. It's the daughters' lines and their marriages, whether they're queen consorts or whether they're queen regnant, which means the top girl. Their offspring, if they're daughters, is the secret aristocracy's most favorable thing, not the males, Johnnies, right? And Prince Charles's father, King Charles's father, the Duke of Edinburgh, he is related to the Garcinda line, which is matrilineal. They're existing today. Now, that's not even, as I said, taking into consideration the Parthian, Atnist, French Merovingian line. Right? So just genealogy alone has been so scrubbed clean so that you have no clue about the role of these princes, princesses, queens, and so on. And it's been scrubbed from history until the most recent of times. I've got a lot of information on this on the Female Illuminati site, which people will find a mine of information there. And about the Merovingian dynasty, the reason why the Templars, the later, because the Merovingian dynasty sort of comes online around the 6th century. Well, we know that Templars don't really appear in history until about the 4th, take the 10th century to be generous, because you have the Hospitallers and people like that. That's several hundred years later. So when you're studying Templars and Hospitallers, hey, they're already finding their roots in the 6th century. They're really called the Franks. Right, and a Frank doesn't mean French, even though they had bastions of power, branches in France. No, the word Frank means German. German tribes, right? And you have them in Portugal as well. So this is a very big spread out Germanic tribe that actually has its one phase of the branch of the Merovingians and Frankists is back in the Holy Land of Israel. There's your Hyksos connection. You see, so this is what I say about these studies. Don't start. Take my advice and never start, because it's just going to be one Aladdin's cave door opening after another until your brain is fried. You need 30 years to even, take a breath when you get into all of this matrilineal material.
Well, Michael, I appreciate that, because you really set the precedence for what we're going to talk about today. In today's society, there's this push towards transgenderism, but more importantly, it's really dominated by men wanting to become women. Now, 20 years ago or so, we would talk about the suppression of the divine feminine that came out of the New Age movement and all these other aspects of this. And do you think that with the birth of modern day Satanism or Luciferianism, when Luciferianism is really Venetian worship, that what we're seeing today is kind of this return to the feminine, of the unmasking of the feminine Illuminati as the real controllers of this world?
Yes, but it's the dark feminine. You'll remember my DVD from many years ago, Divination and the Goddess Tradition, where I examine similar information, but from the positive side, to show the good contributions of females, because there was a split. The Sophics and the Sophianics is what I call them. But yes, but what you're talking about addresses this dark, sinister, because to explain what we just talked about for the last 10 minutes, reason why the story of matrilineal lines is suppressed is because of the matrilineal lines. They create the smart-ass women at the top of the Masonic pyramids, who then have the jurisdiction over the monkeys on a stick, the politicians, the publishers, whatever. It's a long story, but you're absolutely right. So there's an incredible control mechanism, but it's not to say that all women are then indicted. Where we get the transgender thing, though, is two-pronged. One is that men have been deeply feminized from the dark, because well, let's just put it this way: that which we know as malehood and masculinity has simply been eroded, and that's a study that anybody can do. The footprint of that is quite obvious with feminism and malignant feminism and wokeism. So masculinity has been totally erased. So of course, anybody projecting that into the future, where we are now, could easily see that, I think we'll have men who look like men, but mentally they're scrambled. That's one thing, the slow erosion of what it is to be masculine. But then there's this atavistic part that you're alluding to. Atavistic means, ancient, something that's been in the very race memory, in the DNA, and the limbic system that we're, normally would never be on to. And doctors, physicians, psychologists, nobody wants to talk about this. Again, because it's very controversial. But that is a throwback to the paradigms and models of ancient times. I don't like to use the word matriarchy. I prefer gynocracy. But there was something that went on, again, involving aristocracy, but and smaller groups of sects and cults. And one thing we must understand, the moment that you're talking about female Illuminati, and we can argue about whether that's even don't get lost in the phraseology and the names. I think it works. It's just catchy. But this is a sisterhood, the Venus sisterhood, the cult of Venus. We have to nail it that they were mostly a lesbian cult to begin with. They crop up sometimes, like they did in Greece with the Sappho cult, or the famous Amazons. People would know about the Amazons, right? But they weren't the only two almost exclusively female sects that existed in ancient times. They were from India to China to Mongolia. You find this all over the place. But again, it's been scrubbed from history. You really got to dig deep. Ralph Ellis has done some good work on that. So they were mostly a lesbian cult, because the moment that you went into this gynocracy, not matriarchy — matriarchy is a nice distraction from what we're talking about, that was put out by some very cunning people to lead you astray, to lead you away from the cultish aspect of this. Gynocracy, cult. Matriarchy, no, something more normal. So there's been so much sleight of hand here, right? But when you joined the gynocracy, meaning you're a special woman, not every woman, to make it more clear, not every woman in every tribe was automatically a member of the gynocracy. They could be women, but only some select, brilliant young girls would be selected for this gynocracy. So I hope that's clear. And then there's even a difference between the West and East versions of this. But when you did join this gynocracy, one of the first planks, one of the first statutes, one of the first degrees, shall we say, was hatred of the male. It answers your question. So for centuries and centuries, whether it's been the Judaic version or the Western version or the Northern version, whatever version you've got, to join that gynocracy is already, the first plank of it is we hate males. Even though we give birth to them, yeah, but they can be sacrificed to the goddess whenever we want. But this generic hatred of the male and then their lesbian cult is what you're seeing today as the transgender. If they get dumbass men to lose so much of their masculinity that they want to go around, like women, what the hell? That's collateral. Brilliant. Who cares? Right? But really, it is a gynocracy that is, focused entirely on women, and their Venusian outlook, which is bizarre. We would be right to call it satanic as long as you use that word, carefully. Yes, but in many ways, you're not that far off. In fact, this is the real Luciferianism we're talking about right now. And of course, they have male acolytes out front. But as my work shows, all the male secret societies, I don't care who they are, even the Gaionium, even the Knights Templar, the Hospitallers, it's this female order that runs them from behind exclusively and universally. And that group is called the Priory of Sion, the Priory of Sion. But the man who wrote about that, the famous, back in the 80s, the Holy Blood and Holy Grail, never twigged that it was female. That's the missing part of their works, because I love their works. And I love all the other works that talked about it. Lawrence Gardner and, all the names we can think of who went, continued writing bloodline books. But they all missed this part. And that is that the Priory of Sion, as their symbolism clearly shows you, are almost exclusively female. Through the Merovingian line, through the Parthian line, through the Atlas line. And they were smart enough to form all the other Masonic orders we know. And they're behind it. Order of Rebecca, Order of the Eastern Star, all, like I said, the Female Illuminati program goes into great detail. So does the website. People can find out all about it. But if it's male, and this includes even a lot of the patriarchal religions, watch out. As the symbolism shows you, and you must believe in that symbolism, you must follow it to its kernel. Don't just think of it's some accessories, all of this weird symbolism. Holy Mother Church, the Oval Office. You got to follow it. That every inauguration in Washington, D.C. is done under female stars and constellations like Spica and the Dog Star. Follow that. Look at the numerology. Don't just, be given the brochure, the guided tour. That's nonsense. From the ancient Celts making their tombs like the womb and like the female breast up till today, it's female symbolism all the way, and it's for a reason.
One of my favorite, so I lived in Washington, D.C. for 3 years. I was actually working with William Henry during that time, and I was going through and I was doing a whole bunch of just interpretation of the esoteric symbology within Washington, D.C. One of my favorite symbolic features, well, I say favorite because it's very pronounced, is the Capitol building there on Capitoline Hill in Washington, D.C. that's shaped in the form of the owl. And what's interesting is it's shaped in the form of the owl, and at the center is the spire of the Capitol building. And at the top, you have Libertas, also in kind of, if you translate this out in Greek mythology, is Persephone, who went to the underworld and dragged man's soul down inside. And I just found this like one of the most highly powerful symbolic representations of the U.S. federal government. Because the owl, we can look at this as representing Minerva. We can look at it representing Athena, born out of the third eye of Zeus, with all the knowledge and power of the gods, hid the knowledge in the darkness with the owl. And now this owl has Libertas at the top of it, which is representing being drawn down into the underworld, where it really kind of is this epic representation of the female power plus the hiding of the knowledge that the female power does from humanity's eyes.
Yeah. And you'll see that symbol on many houses of education, on schools, big ones, like on the portals. You'll find it at the center of the Pentagon, the little garden in the Pentagon. You find it as the Bohemian Grove, right? Remember that? They have the owl as their symbol, and it is a goddess symbol all the way right through. And the whole idea is that was one of the symbols of the sacred prostitutes that used to meet on the hills, and because the owl sees at night. Well, really what that was is they'd have these wee owl symbols, or even a big one, just like you see at the Bohemian Grove, and a river and a mound, a hill. That's the most important. And then they put the lights, the torches, while they had these orgiastic sex acts. This is part of goddess culture. And every king and every lord and every mayor and every priest was involved. Now, it's not to say that there wasn't the opposite of that. What people have to understand about what we know as Judaism was a homosexual cult. And then Jews have described the interior of the Temple of Solomon right into the Holies of Holies. It's all Kama Sutra symbolism. And all around outside the Holy of Holies, in the Temple of Solomon, was nothing but cubicles with these curtains on it, where what's called the Kedeshah, that's the male prostitutes. You could just walk in as any guy and have sexual liaisons, and that was going on day and night at the Temple of Solomon. And some would sit on the steps. Religion and sex go together. But the females had their side, the cult of Asherah, the cult of Anat, etc., right, which later became Venus, through Aphrodite. They've done a beautiful job, right? But that was a sex cult. And one can get into that story too. But that's what a queen was. You weren't a queen from a political liaison. You were a queen, like the ancient Helena, right? And even the mother of Constantine, whatever. These were people who were initiates, and they were also initiators. So the male symbolism, from the throne that he sat on to other symbolism, which is still used today, it was like say, Lady of the Lake, for instance, to give an example, giving the sword unto Arthur. The three goddesses giving the wings and the armor to whoever, Perseus, and on and the three Grail maidens that escort Arthur to Avalon. Right? What is all this? This whole background. People they just cognitively think that that's some sort of artistry and forget about it. No, you've got to switch it round to make the presence of these females dominant, and then only then, will you start to get a bigger picture on how these people controlled. And it's a hell of a story because there's many threads. But you're talking about the layout of these cities. That's one way into this, because entirely the symbolism of the laying. In fact, in ancient Egypt, no stone was ever laid. You keep seeing the ceremony of the foundation stone being laid. Never was that done without goddess symbolism and a special alignments to the constellations that were sacred to Isis or Hathor or Seshet or whomever. One can get into it, right? But this was key. And then your Persephone symbol is over a dome. The very dome symbolism, the very mound symbolism, Vatican City, all right, built on a hill that was to Aphrodite. And so even in American context, you'll get all of this symbolism, of the Sphinx that you see on the temple, the Masonic temple there, the design of the streets, and then, of course, the owl, which was presided over the nighttime agape feasts and agape ceremonies, which were entirely orgiastic. And if something has to be added to that, it's like the imbibement of then very, very powerful hallucinogenics was also taking place, sex, drugs, rock and roll, right? And that's how they, as today, would, not only initiate the young men who were going to serve them, but also was to secund them. What I'm thinking of like recruitment. Because once you were hooked on it, and that's it, they had you. And so in Masonic symbolism, you'll always find symbols of castration. The very compass and protractor is actually a take on a tool that was used for castration. Okay, and then you have the scimitar of the Shriners, this big bloody sword. This is when you understand, when you've been able to decode it, you'll realize, oh my God, this is all about castrati and eunuchs and male servants.
But also that symbolism of the Masonic symbol is the diamond symbol, but it's also representative of the female vagina. And same thing with Washington, D.C. itself. It's a 10-mile square diamond, of which right. Obviously it's representative of the dove. You have Maryland above, Virgin below, or Virginia below. You have Virgin Mary in the middle. You have the triangle right there, birth, with the dove in the center. And then it's interesting because Washington, D.C. is centered with an obelisk. And it's interesting to look at this because before ancient Egypt, a lot of the obelisks were all rounded and circled at the top, which is masculine in its derivation. But now when we look at the obelisk, especially in Washington, D.C., ancient Egypt, they're squared and pointed, which is an inversion of the masculine, which to me is showing feminine control over the masculine, or kind of a feminine created masculine symbol.
Yeah, and if you often look at the obelisk, is often sits in a sort of the foundation of it, the platform which it's on, is always designed like a Vesica Pisces or a female symbol, even if it's only a circle or an 8-pointed star, and then the phallic. But that means that all masculine symbolism, if you insist on seeing it as masculine, well, at least it's arising out of that which is feminine. So the feminine owns it, even if you insist on seeing it as, masculine. But when you go to the deeper levels, you find out that, look, it's not even masculine at all, right? Actually, that's just a misnomer. The 2 columns, we go, oh, it's very phallic there, Michael. Sure, what are you talking about? Those columns, Masonic columns? Come on, right? That is a diminutive of the portal that you walk through when you enter the temple, whether it's a Masonic lodge or, a real temple in Egypt. Those columns are just a representation of the portal. Well, the portal was sacred to Nephthys, the goddess, and nobody could walk inside. And then when you walked inside, the checkered floor is Isis and Nephthys. Everywhere you go, it's the female. And the portal, the headdress of Nephthys is a portal. And any proper Egyptian scholar, like a real serious one, will always tell you, oh, yeah, these were called the pylons, and they were sacred, to the goddess all the way, as was the wings and the solar disk and the 2 serpents. And then the serpent that the pharaoh wears is also to a goddess. And the little vulture that's often seen beside it, that's another goddess. And on we could go. And so you have to follow the trail.
Here is Isis's sister, so everybody understands.
Yeah, that's good point. But you're right. It's made to look male on the outside for the exoteric level of initiation. And that's the lower degrees of masonry. They're nothing to worry about. They're just full of ignoramuses who just, they got their own motives. It's only when you get to about the 30th degree, Night of the Brazen Serpent, and above that, in Night Kadosh, then the York degrees would move into the Shriners, Scottish Rite, this kind of thing. You'll be open to. So the big secret of masonry is what we've just been discussing right now, that all these orders are run by the females. Is one of the, if not the great revelation. There's other ones, of course, as well. But this has been the eye-opener that the person you've been worshiping all this time, as you went through these Masonic ceremonies, mate, is actually, female. And they don't really hide it. This is the strange thing. They do leave a footprint. Scottish Rite. Well, when's the last time you saw any Scottish Freemasonry on the Scottish Rite? Because it's not about the country. It's about the woman. Scota Rite. Scota, the daughter of Akhenaten, who left Egypt or was thrown out and took her coterie and came to Ireland. That's where she's buried, folks. Then she gives her name to Scotland because her people later traveled to Scotland, and Scotland got its name. And so in Masonry, Scota, right, doesn't refer to the country as much as it refers to a woman. And just in case you didn't believe that, look at the top of the compass, right? We've shown the symbols in our work. You'll see the head of Akhenaten. And you'll see that head also on the Shriner's symbol. And she is the daughter of Akhenaten. So they're Atenists. Indisputable. I don't find Scottish symbolism. I find Egyptian symbolism. Well, anyone knows that Meritaten, the daughter of Akhenaten's nickname was Scotia. And as the ancient chronicles of Ireland and Scotland testify, she came to the UK. She came to Britain with her people, her husband, and is buried in County Kerry in Ireland. What are you going to do with that? What are you going to do with the fact that the cross of the Templars is red, and as they'll openly testify, that's the blood of the castrati. After the penis is severed or whatever ritual, the blood made the cross. That's from Sir Galahad. He's the pure one, meaning he's castrati. He's the true son, right, to sit at the round table, and his cross, the red cross, is his own blood, which is done in ceremony of the female. Then you get it in St. George, who kills the dragon. Decode that symbolism, it's exactly the same. The dragon is the penis, the male energy, that the woman doesn't like. So slaying the dragon or killing the dragon is to cut off your masculinity, and then you can wear the red cross. And you get that on the Templars as well. That blood is not the blood of, Christ. Sorry, it's the blood. Well, even the story of Christ and the wounds that he suffered on allegedly Golgotha, you got to be able to decode that as well. He is castrati too. And that's why 3 women come to minister to his wounds. And that's why the Magdalene, red-haired, lady of the high tower, meaning high place, and as Ralph Ellis has shown, that leads back to Parthia again and the Merovingians and all of that. Once you're open-minded and you decode this, you find out something really, really fascinating here. But the Judaic cult is mostly homosexual, on the priestly level we're talking about here. And the female rivalry of the goddess Asherah, consort to Yahweh, is mostly lesbian. So again, full circle, when you see what's going on today, you've got to connect it. Because these cults didn't go away in ancient times. Their lesbian cult has been going on for centuries. And they do their rites and their rituals, as you said, correctly, under Venus. There's a lot of it going on today. And that's why Hollywood, it's not men who are getting up wearing all the Masonic symbolism and doing these weird headdresses and dances and the dragon symbolism and all. It's women from Madonna onwards. It's women who primarily generate this sick, evil, and very Masonic symbolism in Hollywood, because Hollywood is where they've appeared again. They've reared their head again, not just there, but it's important to point that out. They're there in Hollywood. This is one of the places that they've been able to get the stranglehold on the psyche of the world through the media.
Well, and this is, guys, this is just scratching the surface here, but I just want to add this other point. As you're talking about female symbolism, where this whole conspiracy movement, and you've done your service to this as well, Michael, with your fantastic Brotherhood of Death series, getting into the male side of this, right? But when we look at the female side, just look at the Jesuits, look at the College of Cardinals. What kind of garb are they wearing? What kind of rites and rituals do they perform openly? Look at the symbolism of the church. In fact, I was just rereading some Baron Averell Manhattan, who people don't know him. They have to look up this scholar to get into this. He was member of Knights of Malta, high level, worked within the Vatican circles. He was an Italian aristocrat, an elite guy, but he started to blow the whistle about what was really going on. And he wrote a great book, Vatican Billions, and many others. You have to read his work on this. There's other Vatican insiders as well, Malachi Martin and others that we've mentioned before, who blow the whistle on the dark, dark underbelly of what's going on there. But I wondered if you could say a bit about and what I was going to say about Manhattan is that he refers to the church, and specifically the Vatican Roman Catholic Church, as a female. So he talks about the church as being a her. He refers to it in a feminine way. And that's interesting to me. So maybe say a little bit about that hierarchy in Rome, the Jesuits and their connection to this cult.
Yeah, well, the first thing, yes, exactly. See, so after the suppression of the Knights Templars, about 200 years prior to, the 18th century, they reformed under several different guises. Jesuits was one. The Jesuit order is the Knights Templar re-emerging under a different guise. The what we call Grand Orient Freemasonry is as well. And the Bavarian Illuminati is. Now, you will hear a lot of people doing their absolute best to play that down, because they haven't twigged what we've just said. So when you see the Illuminati presented to you by most scholars, they emphasize, whether they're doing this on purpose or not, I don't know. We have to take each individual account then on its own. But they often fall into you've heard it being said many times, I'm sure you've heard it, that the Illuminati were atheists, right? That they hated monarchy, they hated the church, and they were trying to be libertine and atheist. This is not true at all. Original documents show that they were deeply religious, all right? So that one has to already go out just based on the documentation. I mean, that's just completely false. None of them were atheistic. Then you hear other stories about, them. And I've gone into that on the female Illuminati. I've got articles there that explain this. But in short, then you have this group called the Martinists, right, after Saint Martin. They are an attempt to resurrect the Templars forming, because they went underground, right? But one thing that needs to be said to help really, make this more rigorous is that when the Templars themselves were suppressed, they were only a few. There weren't even more than like 1,000 knights, or the real top brass of the Templars was so few. So, but they had an army of administrators that I just call the clerks or the clerics, and you can think of them as lieutenants, seneschals. There's many terms that they have, and they're the invisible ones, and they wore gold and brown, sort of brownish gold and green. Sorry, green and brown, right? And you can still see that on several modern Masonic lodges. Well, this army of bloody clerics took over the running of the whole Knights Templar empire. And they did it fairly openly because nobody went after them. But they were the ones, none of the Knights Templars could even read and write. When they corresponded with each other, it was handed to these clerics who'd read and sign and write and keep all the accounts, which is meticulous. And we know that the Templars were the early bankers. But people got to get this understood. They weren't the bankers. It was all decompartmentalized and hierarchical. The Knights Templars were good at hacking people to death and going on crusades. And a little bit of architecture. They did have some skills. But the running of their actual administrative empire was run by this army of clerics or clerks. And those guys, nobody punished them. And so they continued to run the empire of the Templars. This is what nobody tells you. And these are the people who then opened these other societies we've just spoke about. They weren't going down. They secretly took orders still from their leaders who were in hiding. But they were told then, you go and open Masonry, you go and open the cult of St. Martin, you go and open Scottish Rite, you develop the ancient order of Masonry, blah, 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 And kings were in the palm of the hands because they owed money to these clerics who were still holding the sword above the heads of anyone who borrowed money from the Templars. You thought, these monarchs and popes who thought they got rid of the Templars thought they got rid of the debt that they owed the Templars, right? But the next thing you know, there's a guy with a briefcase at the door going, knock, knock, knock. Hello, where's our money? Well, who the fuck are you, right? So, and if you didn't respond, you'd be assassinated or killed, or, they'd fund another king to come and take your shit, and that king would go, here you go, guys, here's your money back. So the Templars never went anywhere, right? And this is then the story, it's elaborate because it involves the Knights Hospitallers. The Knights Hospitallers is another name for the clerics. The Order of Malta, right? These are all these clerics that I'm talking about who set up these organizations to keep the Templar Empire running. And what we know later as lawyers, publishers, doctors, there were mendicants, there were medics, all is from this one sect. So I hope that is, that's a missing piece of the connecting tissue that people need to get between the ancient world of the Templars and the modern world of the Illuminati. People mistake it because they think the Illuminati were atheists, and all the window dressing of the Illuminati. Well, I just said that they were in disguise. A couple of hundred years later, they get created. Well, of course they're going to have a different window dressing. They're not going to say, we're the new Templars. Neither is the Rosicrucians going to say that. You've got to look different. But we're fools to fall for, the narrative, which said, they had nothing to do with it. These were modernists. These were people who wanted to reform the world. Yeah, that's the look. They were hiding under that guise. So everything you know about the Illuminati is a lot of lies, in the way that they're presented. What they really are is the group of clerics who mobilized themselves, but then finally did get suppressed. But as I said, anytime you suppress these orders, they appear again. The Illuminati just appeared again, say in the American context, for instance, as the Skull and Bones Society, and other American orders. So once you suppress them here, they just pop up there. And this is, I tell this story on the Female Illuminati site. But why are we talking about, where do the female fit into this? Well, because the Templars in their origin, even before the clerics took control, is controlled by the Priory of Zion. That's just one of their names, the Sisterhood of Death. A very small, select, but ultimately the most powerful cult of Venus. And the Templars were their servants. and all the other orders are their servants. And let you know, if you only have to read the articles, and I pointed out in detail, how you can see this, that how the Templars are directly connected to the female cults. And then to emphasize the power of these female cults. And unfortunately, they've gone nowhere. They're still very much in control of the EU, the EC, many, many royal families, as we just talked about, the matrilineal level. But they want to hide. They cannot afford to, for them to be exposed. They're obligated to leave symbolic signs for those who can have the true keys of decipherment, but they're not going to come out to the masses and let you know that they exist. And one of their great ways to hide themselves is behind male organizations. So hatred of the male, yes, notwithstanding, that's their doctrinal aspect. They're a lesbian cult. But the male is used as a castrate, as a eunuch, as an acolyte, as a lieutenant, and then they put him through the levels of masonry to prove his worth before he gets to really be, a knight commander or whatever. And there's a lot of sick rituals, like Stanley Kubrick and others have tried to point. There's a lot of sick rituals involved to make sure that these males are completely entrapped, and that their reputations can be destroyed in an instant. And these Jeffrey Epstein types, and you think that's only he, it's so vast, but he's an exemplar of one of these castrati, one of their servants. And whether Ghislaine Maxwell was one of his controllers or not, I don't know. But the very fact is that that's usually the dynamic. And so the island that he had and the castle that he had is particularly colored Jewish, but it's mostly an Islamic Muslim design until you're able to decode it, that actually relates to this female cult, in both its Judaic and its Islamic connection. What? How can that even be? Well, that's another history lesson, taking us back to a super secret society called the Gaionim, who were very wealthy Sadducees who, after the fall of Judea through the Romans, they had to go, well, they went a lot of places, but they went east to Babylon and opened a series of Masonic lodges there, and under the name of Gaionim, the Princes of Light, the Exilarchs of Light. So, we can't go into all of that, but I do so in the articles to show you. And the capital G that you see on the masonry is Gaionim. And the smaller case G is the serpent, because this is the serpent sisterhood, the serpent brotherhood. So to answer your question a long way around, the brotherhood of death serves the serpent sisters, and one of them is the Eastern Illuminati, which is this Gaionim. And when the Eastern Illuminati finally started to move back, remember I said the Sadducees moved over to Babylon out of the West because of the fall of their empire, the fall of Judea. But later on, centuries later, as they moved back into the West, they did so and changed their name from Gaionim to Freemason. So the Freemasons this is one of their strands, because they were powerful and wealthy by this time and almost respected. Great wizards, great they had expertise in many, many areas. And as they moved back after the fall of Jerusalem, right, who do they meet coming this way? The Knights Templar, who were on the Crusades. And so the secret history of the world is the unison in Jerusalem, again, in those climes, of the Western Crusaders and the Templars and those kinds of organizations, and this weird secret of Gaionim, they joined up. And so Freemasonry is an amalgam of the most extraordinary cults. But the thing to remember is that when the Gaionim got, maybe even before, maybe even as Sadducees, we don't know, but certainly when they got to Babylon, they fell under the power of the female. They changed. They, instead of becoming patriarchs, something happened where they, were either infiltrated by the female cults, or they themselves willingly turned themselves over to this super powerful group of the sisterhood. Basically, it's the only way to say it. They became agents again. So this Gaionim, these ex-Sadducees, immensely rich and powerful. And then what do the history books tell you? Oh, the Sadducees, they just disappeared. We know about the Pharisees, but the Sadducees just went up in a puff of smoke. It's so bad. I mean, you have to laugh. No, they didn't. And their own books will tell you that that's not the case. But connections have not been made, you see. I'm one of the only people to make these connections, again, and show you that Freemasonry is nothing but it's wrong to say Judaic Gaionim because they renounced they're higher. These are occult Jews who had already, they bear no resemblance to the religious Jew. Right? They're an occult society hiding behind Judaism, no different than, say, because here's another thing I forgot to mention. Who do you think it is who orchestrated the creation of the Frankists and the Sabbateans? Right? The Sabbateans and Frankists are the clerks. Two other organizations that were created by the clerks, and those were specifically created to infiltrate Judaism. So these Templar clerks wanted to infiltrate Judaism. They'd already worked with Jews, right? All the famous ghettos of the world are very near Templar bastions, and the Jews were used as, administrators for the Templars. So lots of the clerks were actually Jews, because they've always been noted to be servants of whatever empire happens to be dominant. So all the most famous ghettos in France and Spain and other countries were right next door to, say, Burgundy or wherever, Champagne, where these Knights Templars ruled. And so they were what's called tassel to purse, right? Now, this doesn't indict all Jews. Most Jews know nothing about this and wouldn't want anything to do with it. But the thing is that the clerks then, they decided that we want to, remember, the Templars have been suppressed. So the clerks needed to always operate through some sort of camouflage. And so they entered into Christianity, and they entered into Islam, and they entered into Judaism as the Sabbatean Frankists. In some of the most interesting history that you can imagine, and they used Freemasonry. They subverted a lot of different organizations. The whole of the Illuminati was funded by rich Rothschild associates, and the Rothschilds would be a perfect example of who we're talking about. Sabbatean Frankists who only have a smokescreen of Judaism on the front, and Jews are writing books about them, going, they're one of us. They hate you, right? Read your Charles Moskowitz's and other people, Barry Shamish, and other Jewish rabbis, writers, who will say, no. These Warburgs, although they have Jewish names, they work for dark satanic occult. But the Christian can't go back. See, I told you. No, you're not allowed to do that. Your organization is as loaded with the Frankists and Sabbateans and Satanists as the Jews are, or Islam. And Epstein's design clearly proves, because the temples of the Gaionim in Babylon looked exactly like that. And then later, one of the movements that the Gaionim made when they sort of entered back into the West was to go to Syria and go back to Jerusalem to set up shop when, things were much calmer, and built designs like that all over Edessa. Ralph Ellis is exposed, you see. And their sons and daughters of the Gaionim are legion, mostly working out of Freemasonry, but they're everywhere. They're absolutely everywhere. And the symbolism betrays it. Once you know how to look for it, you can't count the level of corporate logos that look like the compass and protractor, and all the other, the ashlar, the double cube. My work has been full of it since Origins and Oracles, showing people over and over again, that this symbolism is not only female, but it's replete in the corporate world. And again, Hollywood would be the perfect example of this. So this is just a sketch of how these organizations came about. But this Templar Empire, for all of its power and wealth, and for all the fact that it was mostly male-generated, male administered, is controlled by a much, much more secretive lesbian cult. And they are known, they call themselves this, because we were quibbling over whether we should even use the word Illuminati. Look, hey, they call themselves the whores, the sacred prostitutes. And the symbol that they use is horse, because the word horse, like you see the two Knights Templar guys riding on a horse, the word horse is a pun on whores. And that which you ride or sit upon is your basis. So go and look up the logo of the CFR. It's a man on a horse, right? With his hands like this. All these different organizations welcome, the pharmaceutical groups, right? Look at the prevalence of the horse. Go to city squares all over the world. You'll see the knight riding the horse. They're laughing at you. The whores are what he's riding on, because they are his base. They are his conveyance into war, into politics, whatever. Meaning, really, what it is that he serves them. all the male heads. And the Knights Templar used to wear their hair long to, and they worship the female skull. All of the symbolism is there for the trained eye to see, but you need the right keys of decipherment. Masons wearing the apron, the Scottish Rite, as I said, the Oval Office, as I said, and you're right about the obelisks, Josh, absolutely, and many other symbols besides. The fact that there's always a fountain or a river near the government houses. I don't care if you're in Salzburg or you're in, Brussels or you're in The Hague or wherever you are in London, you'll have the great river running right past the Houses of Parliament. Horses galore, statues of horses. Everybody's walking around taking snapshots, completely fucking clueless. They don't think about it. So the two knights that ride the horse, they're riding the whores, meaning the Priory of Zion. They use this term for themselves because they know what it means to be a sacred prostitute. It's just, it has many, many meanings, but it comes out of the old cult of Semiramis and the whole cult of Asherah, actually. Now, it's interesting because the three words for God, Yahweh, Jehovah, and El Shaddai, are all female terms. They're often plural, but there's a female. El Shaddai, right? Shad is breast. Yahweh is Yod He Vav He is feminine. Unbelievable, right? And so is Jehovah, same thing, feminine. So that points to that there was a female consort at the very least, right? If God himself isn't female, well, then you've got a dyad. You've got an allusion to the fact that there's an androgyny going on, and that's quite correct. As scholars started to look into the origins of Judaism, they found out that this female cult of Asherah was equally, if not much more, powerful. Well, where did those followers go? Where did their rites and rituals go? Well, you couldn't tell unless you knew something about them, right? And this is the thing about the mound and the hill and the lights and the owl and these sex rites. And those sex rites are being performed every day on TV in front of you in the Hollywood extravaganzas we've been addressing. So it's gone full circle. They're not going anywhere, and they haven't changed one damn bit. If anything, they're even more powerful than they were before.
That is just what I tell you guys. Take notes and follow up. This is just phenomenal. I have, I'm sure Josh has a question, and I have a quote that I want to get to eventually here to lead us to the next layer of this rabbit hole, because guys, we've just begun. But before we do that, let me just do a quick sponsor here to make sure that we get to it. It's just quick here. We want to say thank you to Kirk Elliott. Get your gold and silver from him. We got some great promos. So let me just play this quick ad from him, and then we'll come right back.
Silicon Valley Bank debacle demonstrated just how fragile our banking system can be. We don't know what the future holds, but history has shown us that physical gold and silver are a reliable store of value to protect your wealth. Don't let fear of the unknown paralyze you. Take the first step towards securing your financial future. Reach out to Kirk and his team at kirkelliottphd.com/badlands. That's kirkelliottphd.com/badlands.
Awesome. And thank you for, thanks to this network for hosting Earth Chronicles, and thanks to all the sponsors that make it possible. And thanks to you, all the viewers, an exciting chat going on. I can see. Thanks for some of those donations and Rumble Rants you guys drop. That's much appreciated. All of that is what makes this possible. And Josh, we got two options here. I can see you're chomping at the bit. Maybe we could go with your question or comment first, and then we come back to this quote, or do you want to flip that around? What do you think? Oh, and you're muted, brother.
Michael covered so much there in that awesome segment. But I know many people out there, people were asking about the spelling. We got that taken care of to Geonim. So Gaianon, Gaonim, Gaion, various different ways to spell it. I mean, there's hours of rabbit holes I could go down on everything that Michael was talking about. The derivation of these cults, where they come from, Egypt, the Atenist. I mean, just so many pathways. But actually, is for everything that exists, there's a duality. And my question is are there the cults of light, the feminine cults of light that actually are out there, that are good, that are symbolic in nature, and maybe even, fighting against these dark cults? Because a lot of what we see right now manifesting in the world is derived from these dark cults. And, you know, I always have to have the light of hope available, that there are these inclinations of these other societies out there that aren't hell-bent on destroying humankind or enslaving man.
That's a great question. And once upon a time, the answer was yes. Celtic legends, which are a key part of how I uncovered all of this, by the way, and we did a podcast called Ireland's Satanic Cults. Remember that? Which focuses on the vampire legend. Don't want to get into it because I want to stick with your question. But one of the threads that led me to understand about the female Illuminati and the sisterhood is actually the study of the original vampire myth. It's not Bram Stoker. Bram Stoker couldn't bring himself to tell you the truth of the matter, but his predecessor, an Irishman called Sheridan Le Fanu, did. And he wrote of Miracalla, the cult of the female vampire. And we're not going to get into it, but that leads to, and he was drawing on the very ancient myths of what's known as the Fae. Now, in Ireland, the Fae are not positive. The Fae are a female cult of blood-sucking, evil, pedophilic, just monstrous beyond words. And he chose his fiction to expose them. Bram Stoker tried it, just couldn't bring himself to do it, and had a male vampire take the role, Count Dracula. The real story is entirely about these female cults. So the second thing, we mentioned one thing, the hatred of males. But the second plank was the hatred of any of the women of ancestral times that stood against them. Because at one point there was. And I opened the Female Illuminati program that we've done. You can access that by way of the site. By pointing out, and I just call them for convenience, Sophics and Sophianics. Again, you don't want to get lost in the terms. But even in my very first book on Atlantis, in the chapters on the Serpent Sisterhood, I clearly mention there that there's, you know, a cult of women who actually saved the day, who didn't go along with the Nephilim, you know, and resisted. And they're important as well, the cult of the Eves. Now, however, the hatred that the Sophianics had for the Sophics, I think basically wiped out. To tell you the truth, my fear is that they're gone and there's none left. And that almost all of these, you know, Catherines and Christinas and Victorias and Helenas of Aquitaine and what have you, all were on the dark side. All members of the female cults, you know, the Priory of Zion as they're called, and basically also sought out their rivals and murdered them. So the chances of any of the females being left on the positive side, I don't see any more evidence of it. Although I will concede that there was a time, definitely, right, when there was a positive group of women, you know. But the seduction, the waylaying, and many other factors. We haven't talked yet here about, you know, other atavistic aspects that tie into all of this. But my guess is that no. The people who fought this have been mostly males. You know, in recent, what we would call modernity, it's been males who have done their best to expose all of this. The female cults wiped out their enemies, you know, and anyone who would try to speak against them. There's so much could be said about it.
I know
one thing I just thought of as you're saying that, Michael, is even if we don't look to just specific cults, which was what you're asking, Josh, we could look to specific women that as individuals had fought against at least elements of this full frontal attack that we're seeing happen to all of Western civilization in the world. Like you did a great show on Unslaved called Great Women, where you did a salute to some of the great thinkers and females that were trying to combat some of this pestilence coming in with the negative feminism and all of that. So maybe they're not necessarily united secret society behind the scenes, but there have been many individual women that have contributed greatly and are even on the forefront right now exposing this cult of the medics. I find it kind of interesting that during the pandemic, we had a lot of women speaking out against these medics, female doctors, and whatnot, that were trying to expose that. And then the men came afterwards because a lot of men have been sort of pushed into the corner, I guess. So I guess I'm just saying that maybe there's still hope in that sense that, and I speak to women all the time that email me and they're trying to, you know, learn about this, and we have them on Unslaved all the time. So in a way, it might not be an official cult, but we can rely on the individual human being from both genders to fight back against evil as they find it in their lives, right?
Oh yeah, totally accept that. Yep.
Now, the next thing you brought up the Nephilim. So we're going to go there. Let's just open the next layer of this onion. If you go to femaleilluminati.com, right on the homepage, we have just a shocking passage here from the Book of Enoch, which is, of course, part of the Apocrypha. And I'm just going to read it out for you. And then, Michael, you can take it away. And it says, "And it came to pass when the children of men had multiplied, that in those days were born unto them beautiful and comely daughters. And the angels, the children of heaven, saw and lusted after them, and said to one another, Come, let us choose us wives from among the children of men, and beget us children. And all the others together with them took unto themselves wives, and each chose for himself one. And they began to go in unto them, and to defile themselves with them. And they taught them charms and enchantments. And they became pregnant, and they bare great giants, who consumed all the acquisitions of men. And when men could no longer sustain them, the giants turned against them and devoured mankind, and to devour one another's flesh and drink the blood. Then the earth laid accusation against the lawless ones." Damn.
Yeah, these are purged because the cult of that we're talking about, the cult of Venus, had already infiltrated via Constantine, whose mother Helena was a top member of this cult. And so they held their councils to excoriate any of these documents that would have enriched Christianity, because the positive aspect of Christianity was it was fighting both these two cults, these sects. It was fighting the homosexual element in the Jewish hierarchy, that's Christianity, and it was fighting the lesbian cults of the female, Christianity. It's all there for the trained eye to see. They were breaking away in order to fight both that, because it was rampant. It was absolutely rampant, what we're talking about. And so Christianity in part, but then it was hijacked by Constantine and that group, you see, and things started to go pear-shaped after that. Well, and seriously so by the time that your Sabbateans and Frankists are let loose. But as I said, always remember that when you're talking Sabbateans and Frankists, you're really talking about these clerics. So it's more elaborate than, the other authors have written. But Genesis 6 as well is the one I turn to a lot. And I think I have that right on the front page of the Female Illuminati. I'm glad you read that one, though. And this is, in all the different avenues, and threads that I picked up to discover this slowly, right, down through the last how many years, right? That Genesis 6 is the one that is the go-to every time. Because the one thing that it does not say, nor can anyone find no matter how hard they dig, is the resistance of the women to the comely ones, to the heavenly ones, to the Nephilim, to the Anunnaki. They may have come and seized wives from all that they saw and bred with them in one way or another, but where's these missing pages of the resistance of the female world to the giants, to the lords of light and power and technology? And where's the story of the great reprisal of their menfolk to go and save the women? Big missing epics that we're waiting to hear, right? Let's see how we fought back, and there's not a peep. In fact, if anything, the sacred texts that you're reading, these apocrypha, are showing that the women were only too happy to be empowered by these alien invaders, or the Nephilim. And because those Nephilim not only mated with them, but exalted them to the level of queens. So when you study queenship, we opened with genealogy here. Yes, what is a queen? Where the hell did that phenomena come from? Why is history mythologically filled with these sort of, mysterious goddesses who have all of this power? And there's many answers to that. But one of them is contained secretly within the Genesis 6 story of the collusion. That's all you can say, because there's no evidence of any fighting. And something so monumental you would think would be chronicled of how we lost or how we fought or how we bravely died. No, there's none of that. Only is the Nephilim and the women collusion. And other texts also then tell you that no, they loved it. And if you then go out of the Bible to the original antitypes from Sumeria, right? The Enuma Elish and those kinds of works, you'll find that these women are in charge of the creation, like Nin Hersag, Lady of the Rib, right? It's more fleshed out. The role of the power women in Sumerian Babylon mythologies is much more chalked out than it is in the Bible, where it's, but you do have Lilith, and you do have, indications. It's not completely gone from biblical text, but it's an inferior telling of a tale that in more primordial times was clearer. And the Lady of the Rib, just talking about her Ninti or Nin Hersag, there's evidence of genetic manipulation. They call it the house of the goddess, in which she had the samples, of the different forms that were going to become man. It's an amazing story. And we do it in the program, show you these quotes and stuff like that. So, and also in the first book on Atlantis, we went into this. But Genesis 6 is a go-to, and scholars just avoid it like the plague, because it's not just about the visitation of extremely advanced beings to our planet who had negative intentions of controlling everything. There's the story of the collusion of the women. But that's where the shutters come down. That's why, you're only this. I've been in the last, since 2011, when I launched this Female Illuminati project, I've been interviewed 3 times. 2 by you, David, and 1 a little bit we covered slightly on esoteric thoughts. That's it. That's the sum total of interviews of them knocking at my door to get into this theory. The shutdown, right? The shutters come down when you have to look at female criminal history. So, as I've always said, but now it's even more vehemently said, in the conspiracy movement in general, why the masses want to remain, sort of completely resistant, and are right up to this day, and particularly with this thesis, is because these are subjects that are so controversial. They push all the wrong buttons. And so these are subjects that they're not absorbed in decades. They're absorbed in generations. The human race can only take extremely small incremental steps to digest any of the stuff that we're talking about. And so that also makes the journey of a scholar harder, because you get to amass more evidence. You intuitively may know, like I did many, many decades ago, that this is what's going on. That's not good enough. If you want to go out and meet the people, so to speak, and write books and articles and stuff, you've got to assemble some extraordinary evidence, like the etymologies we just spoke of, and the Elohim, and the derivations of where a lot of this might come from, and the real meanings of Yahweh and all. You got to go into a lot of areas just in order to provide evidence for this monument. So it's one of the greatest studies there is. But the trouble is that the shutters come down the moment that you mention woman and female. Even though the Bible is littered with it, the Old Testament is littered with it, what Ralph Ellis has discovered is monumental, exposing exactly this. He frames it in a different way than I do, and he doesn't make it as prominent in his work as I do. But he wrote Scota, Queen of the Scots, that fantastic book that shows the traversal of Scota to Ireland. There are valuable works out there. And there's, we talked earlier about St. George's Cross in blood. Isn't that the emblem of England? The Red Cross? Isn't it the emblem of Switzerland and the Knights Templar? And so we've got castrate symbolism even on the British flag of St. George, and nobody in the world can decode the symbolism. We've got the Star of David on the Ulster flag. We've got crowns and lions and Judaic symbols. But are they Judaic? What is that? What is Judaism? Where does its roots come from, you see? So the thing keeps unfurling. And who's got the time, the patience, and the guts to keep on following where that trail leads? Well, Ralph did, and found out that your so-called Israelites are really the Hyksos of Egypt. Right, well, where do they come from? And were they matriarchal? Were they goddess worshippers? You see, and so you find out one elephant, and the next thing you know, you got a whale in the room, right? I mean, it's just like on and on and on. So this is quite, but I think a lot of that is easier to follow. Difficult as it is, those subjects are easier to follow. But the moment that you bring in womankind into the mix, the auditorium is empty. Everybody's out for a piss. They don't want to hear it. The shutters come down. And this is, of course, because of mystique, right? Which is female generated. So it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The years and years and decades of adulation through art or through movies or whoever it might be, and even prior to that, has oriented the mind so that you just can't see what's in front of you, because there's a veil of mystique covering womankind. And all men have that mystique in one way or another. And it's one of the things we have to fight. It's one of the things that needs to be taken away, this veil of mystique, and then you can sort of, get closer to the truth of it. But as I say, don't be expecting miracles, because this is information that takes generations, you see, to digest. And the research has really only started. My site and programs and writings on this are just to kickstart this, and to connect many of the dots. For instance, talking about etymology, the three maidens who carried the Grail cup. Why maidens in the first place? We've addressed that. But there's a secret in, see, these Holy Blood and Holy Grail and the Da Vinci Code, although they're very good and insightful, you have the woman there, you have the Sophianic woman there, Sophie, her name is, for God's sake. And just watch that movie with educated eyes and you're going to see something when they use Ross Lynn and they use a lot of other symbolism around her. It's all there for the eye to see if you just, but no. But bypassing that, why is it in the real Arthurian legend, which was sacred to the Merovingians and the Templars, that the Grail maidens are three women, right? And what the fuck is this Grail? Well, see, so these movies, although they give you one line of truth, like it means sangreal, holy blood, at the same time block or occlude another meaning that can take you just as far. The word actually comes from crater. Another derivation of the word grail is crater, which meant, cauldron or cup. Crater, down through the years, becomes gradus, grail, and in between that you've got the word gradus that actually mean the same thing. But it doesn't really mean that. Crater and gradus means grade, our English word grade, like Masonic grades. So the three women who hold the cup represent the order of Tsarion, who decide, right, which male is going to be their son, lover, acolyte by a grading system. So the Holy Grail, yes, you can go on that line that was presented to you by the media saying Sangreal, Holy Grail, and everybody followed that line. But etymology also shows that gradus, meaning grades. So they're really telling you that the women control the grading system of all Masonic lodges. They're named after women, or they have female symbolism all the way up. And the male acolyte is graded. And the Holy Grail is the symbol that we are the keepers of the grade. And also, not to mention the fact that when the castration takes place, the penis is put inside the cup. And then that blood, just like it is on the other side with the menstrual blood, becomes the holy blood. There is that connection, which is used in potions. The thing gets very, very dark. Because I said they have their own symbolism and they have their own initiation rites. Some of it's so ghastly that one could even barely talk about it. But the thing is that it shows you straight up that the maidens, the women, the queens and the princesses, they are in control of which monarch gets to be pharaoh, gets to be king. You see, this is what is decoded in these Grail legends. So while you're focused on what the media wants you to believe, deeper research can show an alternative or connected reality, in that sense. So you see that the queen knights, right? The knight means servant. Did you know that? Knight, the very word knight comes from an old word meaning servant, I who serve. Prince Charles, King Charles's crest, his Latin motto says, I serve. All the royal families of Britain have called themselves maintenancers. The word Stuart, as of Stuart dynasty, means steward, maintenancer. What is going on? Who's going to decode all of this? Because they're only placeholders. The male is a placeholder right from day one. And so these things are not accepted in a decade or so. It takes generations because for every little piece of this knowledge to enter your brain, there has to be a commensurate deconstruction of the falsity. If the falsity in your mind and the mystique and everything is still there, no matter how much I shoot at you, these arrows of truth, it doesn't get through. One has to deconstruct their picture, and this goes on multiple levels. In the Celtic mythology, the story of the vampire, the origins of masonry, the genealogies, the origins of Judaism. It's endless. So the deconstruction of what we have been taught and what we know, you see, is so hard for people. They're affiliated with this and that and this, and they love the rivalry and they love the fighting, and they love all of that. And it's very, very difficult for them to really scholarly, see the truth of what is being said, because there's something in the way. And it inhibits people grasping these truths. So that's why, as I said, it's been over 8, 9, 10 years, and we've done 3 interviews, 2 of them with you. Brilliant, great going, So I just laugh. It's unbelievable. They're knocking on your door, right? They're breaking it down. So, Michael, this is amazing. Let us all know about it. Yeah, right.
Now, Michael, with the 3 Grail maidens, didn't this actually derive kind of, and when we think about it in the Grail in the sense of being the derivation of bloodline, didn't this also derive the names of the various countries, the Celts, the Scots, and the Welsh?
Yeah, all of those words need to be looked at, and not very many of them are accurate. The great scholar L.A. Waddell, he wouldn't even use the word Celt. He thought it was totally inappropriate, and I agree with him. At the most, it comes from an old word called Cati, meaning builder in wood. That's about it. Well, builder in wood? Everybody was building in bloody wood. Same thing with the Welsh. The Welsh will go mad if you use the word Welsh. It's Cymru, right? And there's even earlier terms, right? And so my God, this etymology of lands, the word Gael, it's a very late word. If you ask an Irishman, so where do you call? Oh, we're the Gaels. We're the Gaels. You're the fucking Gaels. So yeah. Do you know that they're Egyptians? Gael is one of the derivate Gadalus. It comes from, right? And Gadalus was the husband of Meritatan. They're Egyptians. In Ireland, he's actually called Meal. Hence the Milesians. King Meal is the husband of Scota. But in Scotland, he's known as Gadalus. Right? So the word Gael, and the word Gael in Celtic means foreigner. Right, because they were foreigners. People knew this in Ireland for years but couldn't support it until they started digging up Egyptian boats, Egyptian beads in Ireland and in England, digging them up. All the evidence that the scholars told you wasn't there. So all been discovered, in latter days, and they went, oh my God, what are we going to do now? Well, what you do is you do what you always do. You suppress it. You airbrush it. You don't publish the books and the works.
So, it's almost like we have this post-Diluvian intrusion of culture and society that 6,000 years ago, there started out this kind of exodus out of these various survival areas after the deluge, and the restarting of society started with the reimplementation and the inversion of knowledge as a factor of control.
Yeah, well, when you have secret societies running the shop of the power of the ones I've been describing, of course you're going to have this. They're criminals, universal historical criminals. So they don't want their footprint, being tracked by anyone. They're predators in the long grass. Now, at the same time, though, and this is one of the great bizarrities of this subject, is that they're obligated in a way to leave certain signs of their existence. But they choose to do that in symbolism that's sort of broken up and split around, So it takes anyone you couldn't do it without the keys of decipherment. So they are obligated in one way to put some evidence out there, while they know really that you'll be called a conspiracy theorist, or you'll be called a nutter. If you follow those trails and start looking at the symbolism and the etymologies and what have you. So they're pretty protected. Like I said, all the books that ever talk about the Order of Tsarion, none of them have twigged it. That the reason why it's not the other group, the Prior to Tsarion is separate than the Knights Templar, right? Why? I thought it was all one cult. No, the writers are telling you it's a separate group. You haven't twigged it then? Who they are? Well, no, because that's, poor research. So, and then you have to go to circuitous routes or search through the scholarship, to find little pieces that support, like what Ralph Ellis has discovered about the red-headed queens of Holland and Britain, leading back not just to France, that's where most everybody else took it. He found the Parthian connection, or he found, through the Franks, back to the Judites, but the Judites are not what they present themselves to be, what most Jews think of their history. No, these are Egyptian Hyksos. That opens up, as Josephus Flavius always said, well, wait a minute, what do we do with that? You see, so this is revolutionary. And it's only through generations that people can accept this. So I tried to collect the rare works of these rare geniuses. And I found out that none of them are right themselves. For everyone you get, no matter how perfect they are, there's still little errors, which is inevitable. I don't curse them for it or think bad of that. I just say, well, that's inevitable. No one person has the entire picture. And when you said in the beginning of the show to always do the research yourselves and never to believe what Michael or Ralph or anybody says, for fuck's sake, right? We're just signposting you over to literature, facts, but it's up to you to go and make sense of it yourself, which I'm glad to see that a lot of people have done. So, but that's definitely the recommended route. Don't you be sitting there believing everything that somebody says. Think about it, mull it over, go research yourself. You'll find something very, very interesting in terms of especially secret society symbolism. You'll agree with me in the end that very little of it is actually masculine or male, and that alone should tell you something.
Absolutely, man. This is just so good and very well put. And again, it's all organized on the website, guys. If you go to femaleilluminati.com, there's articles galore. Each article is like a book. Okay, so get those articles. You can also get the book. You can get the presentation. We went down. Chris and I went down to see Michael in Ireland, where we all met there. We all met up in Ireland to do this shoot of the Female Illuminati presentation. I think it's over 8 hours, starting with the fall of the Nephilim all the way up. It's very well done. And there's just nothing but source material that you can go and verify. And that's really what this is. It's not an indictment against one group or another. It's just a study of history. I find it bizarre, Michael, that it's very well and good when I speak to a lot of people in this movement about adopting the idea that the people that control the world solely are male, that we live in a patriarchy and it's always been patriarchal and it's all this and all that. And they still adopt that. And I would say, well, obviously there's evil men, of course, but why can't we even touch the subject of evil women? Just talking about evil women doesn't indict all women. Talking about evil Christians or Jews or Muslims or atheists or politicians or whatever is not to indict a whole group of people, because I think what people are missing, Michael, is the idea of collectivism and the fact that our thinking has become collectivized, that when we think in these big baskets that have a lot of pieces in them, and we think in collectivized terms. We think in terms of groups. And that's why people don't look to the truth of it, which is that the people who are responsible for this level of criminality and evil and predation of mankind are, yes, they're part of cults and cliques and whatnot, but they don't think like that. Well, maybe they do, but we shouldn't think like that. We should think as individuals to ascribe evil to the specific individuals and cults of history that are responsible for it. Whereas today they're like, okay, the white guys owe the black guys money for crimes in the past, and the straight people owe people who are gay all these new elevations in society because of some kind of suppression. But it's all generalized and collectivized. And I try to tell people, I even say to women that I know and love and talk to about this subject, I say, what if I told you that a lot of the ills that you are afraid to face about this subject are an act of evil done against women by other elite dark women who also seek your destruction? I could say the same thing to the Christian, the Jew, the Muslim, the atheist. We could go through the whole group, because you said this years ago and it absolutely changed my life, which was that none of these elites that fly the flag of I'm a Christian, I'm a Jew, I'm a Muslim, I'm a liberal, I'm a Democrat, I'm this, I'm that. That's for the common marketplace. Behind the lodge door, these are a bunch of secret handshaking assholes that are a part of their own fraternities and sororities. They have their own private worship and their own private religions, and they have their own interpretation of the symbolism. I'm throwing a lot of points at you, but I know you understand what I'm saying here. This is crucial, I think, to help with the fact that people think of these things in generalized, collectivized terms, don't they?
Yeah. And they know that when we are stuck in the mud, like you say, and covered in all of this weeds, the youth are naked and ready for the programming. So through your TikToks and through your Hollywood extravaganzas, they say, we don't give a fuck about you. Get out of the way. We've always targeted the youth. So when you realize that your own sons and daughters are the prey of the ones we've been talking about, maybe that will move, women particularly to shelter their children from this obscenities of the magazines and the means by which they use it. And they use it symbolism. So the very front covers of these magazines, as I've labored to show, but these Hollywood extravaganzas, we need more. And where do you get them, right? You think Oprah is going to suddenly one day, these people are dyed in the flesh, part of it. So their love. See, when we see them saying, "Oh, it's wonderful that people are woke. It's wonderful that people are transgender," they have an insider smile, because that's as close as they can get at this point to that old lesbian cultism that they had once before and enjoyed for centuries. We still get further to go, but they know that you have to do it incrementally, and so they are satisfied with the way things are going. And they're knowing that they can now mess up your child's sense of gender, and that the rest is history. Well, we struggle with our cognitive dissonances and our doubt mechanisms and all of that. They're working on your children, working on the children to make them genderless, the gender dysphoria, and so many other evil things that have come down through the schooling system and through the media and what have you. These appalling pop music videos and what have you, you see. And nowadays, so even if you assemble a lot of facts about the criminal history of woman, that woman is more abusive than men are in the home environment, women infanticide, more women are there, more women serial killers are more vicious than men serial killers. You can line up loads and loads of information that we've done and show all of that, and still nothing budges. You see, so then you have to look at the underlying cognitive dissonance is part of it. Psychology is then part of it. And how that image has programmed us down through the centuries, actually, long before the modern media. There's been a lot of mystique involved in how we see women. And this is a woman's fight, because as you rightly said, women are being destroyed. What is real femininity, like what I address in other programs of the past, that's all being equally uprooted as anything against the male is as well. Because obviously, if you're a cult who hate men, you're going to hate the women that love the men.
Right.
The women who admire and love men and work with men side by side, and who never abuse sexuality and beauty, are hated by the sisterhood. So this is, so they can't blame me of being some sort of misogynist. Far from, look, my original works were all in celebration. Go to my first book and you'll see, what I have to say there about the Atlantean times, because there were conflicts. Remember, you read, in our previous interview, you read a quote from about 5,000 years ago from an Irish priestess after a great battle where they spoke of the fall into the Cal Age. Do you remember that?
I do. I wish I actually should have pulled that quote up. I must have it somewhere. I do remember.
Right. Now, that is a very ancient quote recorded in the annals of Ireland. Very, very old, in which there's a prediction by priestesses that women will be shameless and men will be strengthless and the world would fall into ruin. And that's only one of many, many such quotes from across the world. How can you then say that all women were responsible for, the evil that happened on this planet, when it's these high priestesses of Ireland who were warning, about that? So there is a thing called the muse, right? Which is the role of the female to inspire man to his works. So what do you think of the average couch potato today? Men are on record today to say, I have no reason to work. I have no reason to create bridges and infrastructure. I have no zest, no will, because I have no woman and family to work for. Down through the centuries, man has been motivated to build the bridges and hack through the forests, right? and build the civilizations because his inspiration was the muse, was the woman in his life. Whether it's composing music, right? Or building skyscrapers or whatever. Without that consort beside him, he has no will. He has no reason to exist. That's the way Mother Nature wants it. But because of women's betrayal of the male, right, and this welfare state situation, basically democracy, you can't just keep on blaming welfare state. Welfare state is but a subset of what we call democracy, which is the most loathsome form of government ever invented. It just allows criminals and thieves and extorters to run wild with your assent, right? But getting back to the point, don't want to go down there. When that woman then, is able to live on her own or be a single mom or whatever, and all of the things we see today, and she's been programmed by the magazines and by the media to do this, to hate men, because remember, the original gynocracy hate men. So they want to contaminate women's consciousness to also hate men too. But women have the contrary instinct to breed, right? So we get both. We get the woman who will breed, but the woman who will, get rid of the male. You get both together. That's where we are right now. Tomorrow it'll be something else. Will it just be in vitro or whatever? So, and it's heading there very, very fast. Man is quickly becoming redundant. But the couch potato today, who himself is on welfare, is himself, erstwhile, who's lost all his zest, who couldn't care less about his looks, who's just a wastrel in society, is because that woman is not beside him. She was his muse. So this really is uprooting the foundations. And anyone who thinks it's just, that's just the way things are, is a moron, a lunatic. There are reasons for all of this. There are predatory cults who hate the human race, who hate men, who hate women, who hate them to be aspiring and inspired and creating wonderful things. In ancient days, we're using this word Celtic just for convenience, the Celtic woman wouldn't even sleep with a man who had a gut or was the layabout. They wouldn't. They would deny sex. That's how they kept the men on guard and, working out and being strong and wielding swords and bows and arrows. The women would just simply withhold sex from the men who, were lazy and slovenly and wastrel. Brilliant. I think that's fucking marvelous. That's supporting the alpha man. That's supporting their children.
All women should do that.
What's that?
All women should do that. I mean, come on. What better way to support your man?
There you are. It's not rocket science. It's actually quite simple. And then, as I've always said, stop abusing beauty and sexuality. This is another thing that the gynocracy wants you to do. And it's nothing good for you. You think that you're having power over somebody, you're losing your power because the male and the female, needs to be together in a wholesome way. So when you abuse beauty, now the contrary to that is to use it for good reasons. I'm saying be beautiful, right? But use it to lead man up, lead the human race up to more spiritual and holier realities, not the way that women are being taught today, where they're sitting there, in their skimpy bikinis talking about nonsense and seducing and all of it, and teaching their 14-year-old daughters to do the same, literally to be whores. How is that woman going to be happy when she herself is 40? Well, I'll tell you, they're not going to be. They're going to be absolutely, drenched in despair and misery when the hedonistic party ends and they realize, oh my God, I've abused womanhood. I've abused my sexuality. What are you going to do then? And you think then I'm convinced that it's authentic now because you toddled down to the local church or you went into something that's inauthentic. You're only doing that because the party ended, not because you have a genuine spiritual insight that I can't be like this. I'm damaging civilization. No, it's because there's a few wrinkles on your face and the younger chicks are taking your place. This is not authentic, whether it's men or it's women doing that because, the party's ended. Oh, damn, I didn't realize there was a timer on all of this. So we're drenched in this inauthentic change and inauthentic ways of being. But what we're missing is the genuine conscience that says, no, I don't think this is right. And that's all parenting. That's all due to wrong parenting. Because the parents have been moralists and haven't taught morals and ethics to their children, haven't taught them to be intelligent and masculine. at all. They've told them to subscribe to the deep ultra feminization, of our entire civilization. And yet, when you look at the other side, they're not making those mistakes at all. You can't go to these other cultures and act the way that they do when they're over in our culture. So there's a wholesale, population replacement program going on. And the more deeper, conspiracies we've talked about here, they're much harder to see, because they're older. Women can be Grail maidens, all right, but they're meant to lead man not to his loss of masculinity, or that he must serve a black force, a deeply evil force. No, the real Grail maidens are the ones who say, "Grados, yeah, we're going to test you, but only so that you can uphold truth, justice, and liberty. Truth, justice, and freedom." Well, that's not happening right now. So then the male today, on the stereotypical level, has indeed been drained of his purpose in life. He knows he won't meet the woman, he won't get her, so he doesn't need to care about his looks. He thinks that's hopeless, right? And also on a deeper level, he's lost his actual core masculinity that has been inspired by the muse of womankind in his life to inspire him to great works, creatively, art, painting, poetry. All the positive things of civilization require that muse. Men provide that for women. Women used to provide that for men. That's all been, dismantled. It's terrible to see. It's just awful.
Well, and as you're talking there, Michael, it really speaks to me on a personal level as I'm thinking about it, because all the work I do, if people think I'm busy at all these different projects I'm doing and all of that, it's literally because of my family. It's because I have that muse in my life. I'm fortunate enough to have that with my wife and my kids, and that's how they view me, and that's how I view them, and they give me the motivation. Josh is a parent as well. And both of us are here. A lot of people on this network are doing this work and taking all the slings and arrows and being masculine. This is a masculine job that we're doing, and masculine in a sense, not necessarily based on gender, but just the principle of the archetype that's embedded in all of us, both men and women. We have both masculine and feminine qualities psychologically and spiritually. And it's just a different, differential there. But I just wanted to add credence to that when I think about it, what really motivates me to, spend, 2 days straight locked in my office, editing a video or the work that we do, all of us. It's motivation because I want the truth. I want to serve this cause. I believe in it. I love it. True. I have a love of this knowledge. But when I think about doing this to this level, it's because of the muse of the females in my life that are positive forces. And trust me, I've had plenty of negative ones too. But the one thing I wanted to add real quick to let you go, Michael, is that you're basically also explaining this incredible statement you made. I believe it was in the first interview we did or one of the other ones, where you had said, it's going to be women that save the world. It's going to be, it has to be. In fact, it only can be at this point. Is that really?
Yeah, but that was only because I think that men are too stupid to grasp this message.
It could be that problem too. Yeah.
It's women, or this is an address to womankind. All my work on the female Illuminati or Dragon Mother, which is more psychological. See, they're the ones. See, man is not the one being programmed with the atavistic limbic race memory of this gynocratic moment when they were powerful. And this goes to another subject that I'll just briefly touch on, which is the question of matriarchy and the myth of. There really wasn't a real matriarchy. That's been sort of undermined. But the three scholars who first wrote about it, and it had its moment to captivate people, and they assembled quite a bit of evidence, so to speak, was Maria Gimbutas, J.J. Bachofen. These are all, J.J. Bachofen was 19th century. Maria Gimbutas was into the 20th, I think. And a man called Robert Briffault, right? Briffault, but it's pronounced Briffault. And Briffault wrote 3 tremendous volumes called The Mothers. These were the originators of the matriarchal theory. And it might be a little bit more true for the Middle East, Levant, the Jewish world, Canaanites. It doesn't hold as much water when you come to Europe. That's one thing that must be said. But even if you took them seriously and read these great works, right, they actually come up with some very interesting information. And one thing that Briffault said was that women don't even need men at all. Now, he's writing of ancient antiquity. This would be the Neolithic period and whatever, he's giving you these insights and saying, and all I do is I apply what he says to this cult, the gynocracy, more than I do to all women. But he writes extensively on the fact that man is a fucking useless article. Right? He's saying that as far as the matriarch goes, it is deeply antithetical to the existence of the male. And when a Freud or when a Briffault or any of these, they're studying, what they thought was matriarchy, or they're looking back in history for evidence of it, they did find, and it's still the same today in certain primitive peoples like the Tria brands, right, or New Guinea or whatever, you get this phenomenon I'm going to mention, and they just took that and went, oh wow, what does this tell us about the rest of the world, right? But they found out that the women were so selective that they saw the father figure, let's call it, as a totally useless article, treated him like that, and if they had a brother, the brother was the real patriarch that they would accept, not the actual father. He was a useless article. This is what Briffault is showing, and they would sidestep the whole thing and have their brother. This is the woman would have her brother be in charge of the children. All right, and making the point that as far as any kind of basic primordial cultures are concerned, or any kind of culture, the woman can do without the male and maybe only use him in a menial way. But then she has her brother to do those menial tasks. He can be her acolyte, similar to what we've been talking about before. And the actual paternal, patriarch, he's reduced to a level much, much lower. Sigmund Freud was aware of that. He didn't believe in matriarchy, but he picked up an aspect of this in his famous book, Totem and Taboo, in which the sons get together and murder their father to get access to the women, including the mother. Skip to the Arthurian legend. The enemy of King Arthur and of Camelot and of the whole of the, setup there is his half-sister, Morgane Le Fay. And the word Le Fay is not by accident. Her acolyte is Mordred, her son. Why is it not that Mordred is the enemy of Arthur and Morgane Le Fay is in a secondary position? But it's not. It's Morgane Le Fay is the evil arc, right, who brings up the child, Mordred, to hate his uncle. You see, this is the same dynamic again. Hate the father, hate the real patriarch, and try to overthrow his dynasty, overthrow Camelot for her will's sake. Well, Briffault, and I'm making this very brief, Briffault is saying that basically in the consciousness of all womankind, this dynamic existed. Then you don't have to be a rocket scientist to say that anything that existed as a paradigm for thousands of years, even if it's not capitalized matriarchy, that it's not, right? But even if that prevailed amongst the consciousness of women in their sects, in their gynocratic cults or whatever, it's still back here. Therefore, it means it still has a presence in the minds of women today. It doesn't mean that those women are consciously manufacturing evil. It's already lurking within them in what's known as an atavistic manner, racial memory. And there it would stay and all would be well. It would be just there amongst the big mix of everything that is in our brains. But what has happened is that through the media, the atavistic evil has triggered on a daily basis. So nothing of this subject can ever be broached without that. Because you can have a lot of atavistic. My God, we've got the whole of history in our brains. Why pick out one thing? I pick it out. You isolate it because the media, the Hollywood media, right, the Meads, this female sect runs it. These Oprahs work for it. These Abramoviches. And they have for now, since the beginning of the television, through their advertising, stimulate, right? Ties into the stuff when you ask me how did I get into this in the first place? All that stuff I told you about subliminals and media and advertising. Where did that road lead? Where did a lot of those roads lead? They led to this. There's a connection between the first studies and the last, right? So through the programming, they're tapping into the atavistic. They awaken it. It's not of any power in itself. Maybe some crazy women, okay, right, fine. You know, like the ones at Trump Tower with their skinned animals going, waving a dead rat and doing some divination outside the poor man's hotel. Yeah, we get those types too. But no, they want more than a bunch of kooks. So they know how to stimulate through images, through advertising. You know, they're triggering, and it doesn't take a few years. This takes a long time. And I've been seeing it, happen for a long, long time through the sitcoms, through the reality TV and billboards and a million other ways that we've pointed out. They stimulate this atavistic evil that's lurking within the consciousness of women. And therefore, to answer your question, yes, is a man going to fix that? Is he going to get in there and re-hardwire that? No, it's for the woman to catch it. It's happening to the woman's own psyche. She's got to feel it. She's got to know this is wrong and change it from within. So it's a long-winded way of saying, you bet it's going to be with women. They're the victims of it, and they need to analyze it and decode what it is and do something about it, apply the remedy. Man can only be mostly a spectator. So this work definitely is not misogynistic and against women. It's for women to free themselves of something, a sorcery, that is beyond pestilential. And this goes before your Elizabeth Bathory's and before the Fae and all of that. Men who've tried to write about this had to do it in disguise in the past years. It's been hidden. But again, now the truth is coming forth. But it is absolutely for women to apply and administer to themselves the remedy and stop this elite, order of evil, this sisterhood, from programming them through all the filthy magazines and the anti-male hatred and the weaponized feminism. All of it has to be chucked out and thrown out.
That was incredibly powerful, and there's a ton of thoughts going through my mind when you're talking about this, and especially with the archetypical nature of how this actually operates, because we see this directly in society unfolding within the family structure, but we also see it being portrayed within literature and within Hollywood. And what I'm talking about here, people, is what Michael was saying was the daughter latches onto the brother becomes this accolade for the sister, and the father figure becomes the enemy. And typically a woman is going to present this in the sense of victimhood of different types of abuses, but you got to see how those abuses actually derived. And this is lineal, right? This comes from his mother or his sister or his aunt or something of that nature that was pressed down upon him that caused him suffering. And now he's bringing it down onto his daughter. And we see this chain of events that's unfolded over time. And this is becoming manifest. And it's really toxic for society that this is allowed to happen, or that this is psychologically adapted within a culture. And through the propagation of media, through the propagation of literature, because it's psycho warfare. I mean, it's psychological warfare, it's psychological targeting, but we have to see through it. And, for people out there and I'm trying to think of the names of the movies, because I've seen quite a few of them. You see more on episodes of like sitcoms and stuff like that, where the sister, like the brother, is perceived as evil. He kills the father or something like that, but it was really the sister who is the mastermind. And this is really the case of what you're talking about here. And see, the brother can't do anything because he was manipulated into this by the power of the woman, in a sense, by the victimhood of the woman. And now she is kind of the one who holds the power within these various types of relationships, which is kind of interesting. And it's a really symbolic representation of our society today.
Yeah. And remember, there are movies that leak it. There's movies that everything we've talked about, there are films out there and shows that leak it. And some of them are very spectacular. Others are more unknown, maybe a small thing in Britain that most people wouldn't even recognize or remember. But they have been. And there are even gargantuan, like we mentioned, the Da Vinci Code. There's a lot in there. You see, about these matrilineal lines that are royal, and they've been scrubbed. Lawrence Gardner, who's passed away, but he did his best to sort of hint, and all he did was hint that the Burke's peerages of these royal families has been edited. They tell you that a line died out when it didn't. When they say that, that royal line that was back there in the 1800s, that died out. No, it became matrilineal. That's what they mean by died out. right? The matriarchs have said that if a male line, paternal line, stops, right, then that's considered stop. But if a woman took over, if a girl was born, it continues in the matrilineal line, but that's not to be recorded. What skews our history more? So these Juan Carloses of Spain, these Constantines, I'm talking about later ones, these Adolphuses, these Leopolds, right? I just mentioned a couple of them, the three great queens. But like I said, Prince Charles, the other Charleses of Spain and France, the list goes on of these Bourbon monarchs, King Louis XIV and XV, are all related to this Garcenda line. That's just one matrilineal line. And if people were to study that, they can go to the Female Illuminati site, check everything out there, every single link and page. You're gonna realize the truth of this. But they tell you that certain female lodges of Freemasonry only date back to the beginning of the 20th century. They will, never talk about earlier ones that date back to the 17th and 1800s, the French Revolution. They never talk about the Order of the Eastern Star, right? Which, if you look at their diadems, I think you had an image of it in the very good opening that you had, the image. The Order of the Eastern Star, right in the middle of their diadem, it has the word fatal. So of all the words of the English language, one of the most senior female Masonic lodges, which many of the elite women who run the EU and, these Condoleezza Rice level type women are members of it. And it has the word fatal. Is that fatal? As in femme fatale? Again, a pun on the ones who are the fatal women, the whores, the sacred prostitutes. They're all around you. Yeah. The logo these are Masonic symbols, and I don't know if it's on this one, but the word fatal. Of all the words in the English language. So they're not even trying to hide. And by the way, this is an inverted pentagram, no less. Inverted.
Well, look here, Michael, you've got the chalice. You got there's the grail on the right, the red triangle. You got the sword with, I don't know if that's some kind of a feather or if that's indicating the female colors. The knights would fight for the female and they would take a kerchief of them, the colors they would wear into battle. You have, what is that, wheat or mushrooms or something? Then you have the cross and the wand, the crown and the wand. Remember, there was a wand ceremony that was done over Queen Elizabeth when she died, allegedly. Sure. And then all that, and it just keep going on this. The Pentagon is right there. What's that? It's got the S, the book on top. Man, it's right. It's all there.
Yeah, many of these symbols are alluding to the female, as I said. If you pull out a dollar bill, the number 13 appears 17 times. The 13 represents the sisterhood. The shield that stares you in the face on the dollar bill. The shield, not what's on the shield, but the shield itself, that shield symbol. And on the Female Illuminati site, you'll find an extrapolation of that in the article, the Sword and the Shield. Great the very article. Shield symbol is female, right? It's right there in front of you, as is the eagle. And the arrows, they relate to Neith, the goddess Neith. The olives relate to Asherah, right? You can decode the whole thing, the number 13 appearing so many times on the dollar bill, and on we could go. And I've done some good work on that. The Female Illuminati program on Unslaved would be, the go-to there, because it's just nothing but that. It takes you through the history of everything we've been talking about. And ends with this call to womankind, to stop it, to fight it, to stop buying those magazines, put the busters out of business. They may be women, but they're not doing you any favors. and this won't, see, also that we got to remember this isn't going to end. These women are ramping up their power right now. We've got redheads again ruling in the EU right now. And so there's danger, even in the American milieu. So seeing their corruption, see, you asked a question earlier about, and we got off subject into something else. Can't remember what you were asking, but see, these groups all fall under. Oh yeah, you were asking about the Jesuits and the Illuminati, and I said that they were branches of the clerics. There were new ways for the Templar agenda to come forth, and they can be short-lived. It doesn't really matter to them, because when one goes down, they open just another one, right? But what also connects here is that group is known collectively as the fourth sect. So if you really want to be completely accurate with terminology and try to avoid some of the lesser accurate, like say Illuminati, and people go, I don't like it, it doesn't work. Well, then try Exelarch or Prince of Light or Gaionium, right? Or fourth sect. So the fourth sect was also known as the Nazarenes to Christians. But they would recognize this Judaic sect. And they were rivals of the fifth sect, who became the papal Pauline line. So anybody who's Christian listening to this can research this. The Pauline line, right, which passed through Marcion and then, centered in Rome, and is the Catholicism and the Christianity we kind of know. It's had its troubles down through the years. It's had its breakaway sects, had the Reformation and all of that. But all of that, Protestant or Catholic, is the fifth sect. And they're a study unto themselves. You mentioned the cardinals earlier on. And cardinal comes from the word cardia, which is a goddess, just in case, because you were talking about the female symbolism. The very word cardinal is a goddess. So, but getting back to the point, now the fourth sect lost out in the great conflict between the two sects. But that doesn't mean they were obliterated and wiped out. Far from it. They just lost out. But they became the shadow group that swore vengeance on the fifth sect. And their story, which we haven't gone into here, is a long period of conflict. And their agenda was taken up by the Knights Templar, Hospitallers, Gaionium, Masons. So all these secret societies we've been talking about, including the female sects, actually emanate from this group called the fourth sect. They all gel together. And they all have generally the same kind of agenda. What is that agenda? We know it today. We know it so clearly today. But under what name? Socialism. So your EU, your EC, the forum, these World Economic Forums, and all the shit that's happening today are forms of hybridized socialism. Where does socialism come from? Even its manifestation in communist Russia is all these Grand Orient Freemasons. Grand Orient Freemasonry is one of the powerful version of the clerics that they created. It has some very ancient origins. Like I said, Scottish Rite goes back to the ancient goddess, goes back to Scotia in Ireland very early. But you have this Eastern group as well. And so the Order of the Eastern Star, whose logo you just showed, jogged my memory here. That Eastern Illuminati comes out of this group. They are the Nazarene sect. They have nothing to do with Christianity. They're just a sect. But they fought. They've been fighting ever since. But a big change happened because in 1860, they won the fight. And what we know as fifth sect Christianity basically was infiltrated. Its earliest date is 1860 that I've discovered. And then in 1890, right? And this is all documented for people on the website, the Female Illuminati website. So don't worry if you're missing some of this. 1890 was another very, very important moment. And this is when we have the creation of what is known as Christian socialism. You couldn't get two things more separate, actually. And then, we have to go into the 20th century with the Bolshevik Revolution, ramp this up. The fourth sect wins and creates communism, through Grand Orient Freemasonry. And then on the way down until Vatican II and John Paul II, right? He is one of the main proponents of it, leading up, I'm being very fast here, but leading up to the fall of the Berlin Wall, where the communist embryo can be broken for the genie comes out of the bottle. The new ultra socialism that they want for the rest of the race, that was, communism was but a capsule for, could now pass away, and we got Bono
getting knighted,
right?
by the way.
We don't need a pope. Yeah, we don't need a pope. We've got the character. We've got Obama. We've got all of this. So one thing leads to another. This fourth sect is the origin of socialism. That means Fabianism. That means feminism, and all the other isms that you've got that rule the world today. Comes out of Christian socialism. But Christian socialism was the overthrow of the fifth sect. Now, they had to keep the window dressing. So the popes that came forth had you'd never make a straight break, because that would have caused revolution all over the world amongst Orthodox Christians. All over the world wouldn't have accepted this. So it took the best part of 100 years, since 1860 to Vatican II. It's taken all of that length of time. Then, don't forget, they put out disinformationalists from their own coterie to give you fake reasons why Christianity has changed into what it is. They knew that some people would be clever, like you mentioned Avro Manhattan earlier, and others, Father Malachi, Father Alberto, Charles Chiniquet. The world's full of people who twigged what's going on here, right? So you put out disinformationalists to say, well, the Vatican was infiltrated by Masons, and everybody chases after that.
Well, this is also the creation of the black nobility. This is the Savoy family-led army that went into the papacy. And this is where the Orsini and the Colonna and all these families basically go with the Vatican. They're held hostage for a while, and they come out basically the victors of this.
You're completely right. So the College of Cardinals has been taken over long ago by their own children, who converted over to the doctrines of the Nazarenes. And that's an interesting story of how that happened. But the long and the short of it is they were overthrown. And that's why homosexuality is all endorsed now and blah, blah, blah. The papacy has weakened. It's rubbish. It's just been not that it was perfect to begin with, but it had a lot. It's been infiltrated by the fourth sect. So they won the day. And that's why you have the Vatican-Moscow alliance, right? The Lateran Treaty with the fascists, was the last attempt of the fifth sect to continue world control. But they made a mess of it. The Lateran Treaty, they didn't understand that fascism is just another form of socialism, right? But, they didn't realize that. They thought they were going with conservatives. They had no idea. They read the whole situation wrongly. But as I said, by this time, the few popes who were still of the fifth sect were waging a losing battle. I've got a whole article on that. We're way past the point where the infiltration has taken place. So these last moments of the attempts of the last little small group of the fifth sect to hold power, they ultimately failed. The very last one would have been the Banco de Ambrosio, fiasco with Luca Gelli and Roberto Calvi, the guy who was found dead hanging under Blackfriars Bridge. That was a final attempt as well, of the last of the non-communists, non-socialistic fifth sect guys to try and set up anew in South America. But they were betrayed by people within, and that's how that fell apart. And Luca Gelli is still under, he's probably dead now, but last I knew he was still under house arrest in Italy. So many of the events then of the 20th century are run by this fourth sect in order to bring about their world domination, which we know, as the New World Order. But they had to have the world wars to weaken their enemies, the Protestant Germany and all. There's so much we could go into that as well. And then there's an article, I think it's number 5, which is a must read for people on the Female Illuminati site. And that takes us in yet another direction, which empowered the fourth sect and empowered the female group specifically we're talking about, which has to do with a comet, the entrance of a comet in prehistoric times. We're not going to get into it here, but there's an actual important, unbelievable, tie-in here with what can only be called signs in the sky and the coming of a great devastating comet that run ruin over the ancient world. And the result of the devastation, which was recorded by every culture, actually ties in to a great deal of the doctrine and symbolism of this gynocracy we've been talking about. It needs to be plugged in, because they may be a gynocracy, but where did their beliefs come from? Right. What is their own symbols? I get into all of this because I didn't just study symbolism. I started to go in deep to their own beloved symbols, like the horse, the black and white horse. Slowly you get the keys of decipherment to wade through the world of symbolism to get to these beloved symbols that they have. And then you're left with trying to explain, what's it all about? And it's deciphering those that lead you even further and further into, the deeper stuff that the other scholars didn't bother penetrating into, or did a bit, but then totally misinterpreted the fucking lot of it, right? So
do
that
you
is another
think that
interesting story.
Michael, I'm curious. Do you think that the kind of the ancient tale of the comet and the rising of Venus were merged into this Luciferian kind of a cult idea? Because we have next week is Easter. Easter is Easter. The Easter rising is the Venus rising, give way to the Passover, and rising before the sun, bringing back fertility. But you also have this event that happened a long time ago, in the sense where this one object went through the sky and it illumined the sky brighter than the sun, and it wreaked havoc upon the earth and destroyed the earth, caused the floods, all these different things. And so do you think, like astrotheologically, these two ideas were combined into one, and this is kind of where we get this Easter Luciferian aspect from?
Yeah. The quick answer to that is absolutely, and more besides. But I've isolated 3 major events. There's David Talbot and his Signs in the Sky. He doesn't get what we're talking about, but he done some beautiful research to show you that there was a conjunction between Saturn, Mars, and Venus, as you say, that was seen all over the world. It's one of the reasons why cultures that have nothing to do with each other worship the same symbols, right? There's other reasons for that, but yeah, that would answer that. Then there was the coming of the comet, which is a universal phenomena as well. And there was, there's other related events relating to this great stellar cults. You know, there's a lot one could say. But even if I think in the article I only focus on those 2 things. Now, the Venus cult would predate the comet cult. It's really primordial. The comet is a later phenomena that shook the shit out of the Egyptian world, you know, out of the East, although its effects were seen all over the place. And there's a strange, what it did in very, very short, it created a kind of mania. It created psychosis throughout the entire world. And from that came this cult of the redhead. This is where it originates. And so I explained this, you know, the redheaded queen, which you find out of course, there's always been redheads before a comet arrived, right? But the conflation, as you're describing it, took place. That after the comet's devastation and people were, you know, completely traumatized, somehow, not quite clear how, redheaded women were considered special and considered the daughters of Set.
Actually, just quickly there, Michael, to back this up in the movies, do you know the movie 300, where they talk about 300 Spartans? And I think we spoke about how that, that's a different one. But the woman that is looked at as the oracle, who's held by this evil, dark priesthood as a slave, she's like a sex slave for them, or at least that's how the movie does it. It's probably reversed. But it ends up that this woman's swimming around in the water that gives the oracle, that tells them all the truths and all this. Guess what? She's redheaded, and she comes from that line. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, you will see this. It's even indicative of the Fae as well. But that's right. There was a strange connection. People can read about it in the article From Heaven to Earth. And it talks about the sky being lit up by these various plasma discharges. And this was seen throughout the world. Then the coming of the comet, there were several celestial events, you know, and the coming of the comet basically created the cult of Set. So when I spoke earlier of Atonists, others have spoken of that, but they missed this piece. And that is that the Atonists were a group of solar worshippers, but only in an ersatz way. Akhenaten, Meritaten, all of these solar worshippers of Aten were using the sun, like all Luciferians do, out front, right? By the simple means that if I'm shining a bright light in your eyes, I'm concealed. So what we know as sun worship was contaminated from the old Amonist Druidic traditions, which was sacred and holy. It was now picked up by Akhenaten's cult and used duplicitously as a shield, because the sun has negative properties as well. But in short, the cult of Set, which was the cult of the comet, and is often mistaken by people who haven't done their homework as the cult of Saturn, and you'll get all sorts of commentary on that. They're way off. It's the cult of Set. The comet was personified as a god, the god Set. And that created a cult of priests, but not only of priests, of priestesses. This is the thing, again, people miss, right? So there's that tie-in that needs to be explained as well, because otherwise you're not explaining their beliefs. They're wild and bizarre. I wouldn't call it wonderful, but they're wild and bizarre beliefs that involve human sacrifice, bizarre orgiastic rites, all of that comes from something. And what it comes from is celestial events. So I walk people through the hideousness of it in that article. Then another role, there's so much to this, but I'm trying to give you a background on the Order of Sion, trying to flesh out who they are and what it's all about, the fourth sect. These fourth sect are old Parthian, Atnast, Setians. So we didn't mention Set, that's why I'm trying to bring this in. Now, Set is nothing but the Egyptian Satan. So if somebody out there listening to this goes, oh, Michael, they're all Satanists, congratulations, you're right. We're just unpacking that, just dissecting what you mean there. Satan, right, comes into Judaism as an old version of the dark god, that ravaged the sky. They really thought it was gods. And there's a connection to El Shaddai and Seth, and Satan and what have you. And sun, Set, all of this comes out of this. There's so much that comes out of the cult of Set. It's not even funny. And what came out of it was this fake monotheism, the monotheism of Akhenaten that everybody fucking worships. All the books are, Akhenaten, the great Jesus before Jesus, the great Moses before Moses. What a lot of tosh. This was a dark, evil bastard, right? Whose cult was, dedicated to Set, but who came up with the brilliant idea, to put the god Aton out front. Because what people don't understand about ancient Egypt is that you had popular worship, popular gods, and you had private worship and private gods. And it meant private. And these were the gods of dynasties. So only in their own homes would they have sacred shrines. There's this private worship. And it's conceded by the best Egyptologists there are. But nobody's drawn the proper conclusions from it. And this went for Babylon and went for the Jews, right? The rabbis, the Kabbalists. And by the way, the Kabbalah comes from the goddess name Kabel or Sabel. So even the whole of the Kabbalah is dedicated to the Shekinah and to the goddess Sabel. So work it out. But the Setians discovered that they can lure people in and they can hide their private worship by just, hybridizing a kind of solar worship that became known as Atonism. Now, where they got it from and all this is a very interesting story, but it's not relevant here. So these Setian, that's really Setian Atonists. And they are the ones who, gave rise to the female Illuminati. That's where they date from. There is an Atlantean connection, as we said, to the Nephilim, but this would be the next major go-to place to look for their origins. Now, we haven't explained how that happened. Why did something that was started by Akhenaten and Tutankhamun, males, how do you say that leads to the female Illuminati? And that story is revealed in the Old Testament, at this very moment when you hear about the raising of the brazen standard or the brazen serpent in the desert. We go into it in detail in the Female Illuminati program. That marks something. Actually, the later, moment at Sinai when the holy people revel and go mad and build the golden calf, that one is good too, as sort of like a symbol, an indicator that the Bible authors put in there for us. To tell us about this. But the bigger one is the raising of the brazen standard allegedly by Moses, right? Well, that moment, we can't get into it here, but if people watch the program, they'll understand that this is the moment where we get the rise of the female Illuminati as an actual entity. But as to their belief systems, they're Setian, and that means they're generated from the comet activity and other celestial events. So that also, I've written about that on the Female Illuminati as well. I know that's a lot of information, but those who really want to uncover the origin of secret societies, need to pay attention to all of it.
And just for my own chronology here, if we were to, when we could do a whole separate show on this, if we're talking about the Nephilim, the Rephaim, and the fallen ones that came originally, and that could have been the start of the idea of genetic hybridization and the mating and the alien DNA and all of that, if we take that on board, that trauma would have happened well before the trauma of the past shock of the cometary visitation, which produced these later cults. But the line, the matriarchal or gynocric line of those involved, both men and women, I guess, to create the Setian Atonism, they are still bloodline descended from these hybridized creatures, these hybridized beings with the Nephilim, right? So do you have that, maybe just kind of bring that chronology and the theory out for people?
Yeah, a lot longer before. But remember, at that time, this group that we're talking about is very select. There really are queens. They're not all women. The Adamic race, which include Eves, were servants. And this one little group of the ones who had been mating with the Nephilim, so to speak, that is a group that continued in a matrilineal line and initiated their own daughters, and that is a definite strain. And that's the place that you look to substantiate aristocracy, not later, right? What the phenomenon we know of queens and kings and aristocracy comes from this Nephilim alliance. So it's already an obscenity. It created hierarchy. See, the Star of David, right, is made up of two triangles. The upward pointing triangle, see, again, it goes back to the word Illuminati and people's dislike of using the term. There's truth to that because it's really the Illies. The phoneme or the word root is Illu, right? Not Illuminati, but Ille, L, right? L or Illies. Now, the Illies were the high ones. There's another word for the Nephilim, right? The kings of old, the great archons. Their symbol is the upward pointing triangle. The downward pointing triangle that we overlay it is the priests of the Illies.
Oh, okay.
Who take their knowledge and transmit it to you, chump, in the village. So the six-pointed star, wherever you find it, that's what it really represents, is the priesthood who transmits the will of the Illi. And this involves women, the Illi are, I think, women as well, like Ninti. And the will of the Illis, the real Illuminati, is transmitted below with the ones that they've chosen. We call them priests. But why only male priests? Well, what I'm bringing to the table is, look, the priests are dressing in women's clothes right up to the modern day because they are the female Illuminati. When you see a priest or a pope or a cardinal, do you know that that's a member of the female Illuminati? He's telling you loudly enough.
Yeah, they see them as just men and women. People think gender. They don't get the depth of this.
That's it.
The feminized
so
dress
we've been
of
bamboozled. They know. And the Holy Mother Church and the chalice and all the symbolism of it, the navel, I've gone into that in the Trees of Life to break it all down. So those priests and their families and their women folk are part of this great ancient cabal that does indeed biologically link back to the Nephilim. But the one group that was important, now that you've reminded me, were the connection to the two parts you've talked about, the later Egyptian rise of the Atnists and the Atlanteans, is through a group known as the Great Royal Wives. But without that, you can't make the connection. Now, the Great Royal Wives were the most powerful female cult that ever existed. And any female cult that we've spoken of now is in some way connected to them. It's more complex than that, actually, because they're actually a breakaway sect from the Great Royal Wives. The Great Royal Wives, but let's talk about them for just a second to fill in the blanks. You could not be king in Egypt or pharaoh for centuries without the approval, not just the approval. You had to marry the queen that the Great Royal Wives, a descendant of that lodge, because that's what they were. All female lodges are based on this prototype, right? So you had to marry one of their house, one of their princesses, one of their nobility. Like in the case of Akhenaten, he only became pharaoh because he married a woman called Situmun, who was the member of the Great Royal Wife. Nefertiti was not a member of the Great Royal Wives and was hated by her. Her burial site has not yet been found, nor has Akhenaten's. You wouldn't believe what went on, right? But the thing is that the Great Royal Wives, that is the group that has the Atlantean connection. And they were the most powerful group. No king, no pharaoh was true unless they inaugurated him. They consecrated him. And so they would send their agents, you see, to the coronation of a pharaoh. They selected him, basically. It was all not matriarchal. That's not the word to use. They were a gynocracy, a sect, a cult. And they bloody well decided who was going to be king or queen, as it later became, right? So your Cleopatras and all of these things, it all ties in from the ancient world. That would be the actual connection. And so I go into that. And so their ways, their symbols, their tutelary goddesses right? Stellar goddesses. It's their iconography that then continues. Now, that priesthood, and I mean female priesthood here, why the second part of what we talked about was important with the signs in the sky and everything like that, is because that same priesthood, that same sisterhood got deeply empowered in a way that I described in the article. It would take too long to describe now. They became infinitely more powerful because of these tragedies that took place. In times of trauma, things radically change for cultures, and even whole kingdoms change because, a random element comes in. So the random element of what happened, with these constellational conjunctions and what happened with the coming of the comet so tore up the ancient status quo that, everything was in flux. Everything was in chaos. And that's when this sisterhood gathered power, basically is the way to say it. And this happened all over the world. Happened from ancient, Egypt, Greece, wherever, right over to Ireland. There was an empowering of this cult. I think mostly for the bad. But it's just interesting to objectively, describe how it happened, just for the sake of people interested in that subject, just to hear it unbiasedly said. And it's really a rather fascinating. And what happened at that time to empower the sisterhood sees its ramifications down through Greece, through Rome, right into Judaism, and it builds in power. Then if you wanted yet another, tie-in, again, we won't explain it at length, but during these agape festivals, during these initiations, which included sometimes the castration and all of that we've been talking about, we haven't mentioned the use of entheogens and hallucinogenics. But as the Bach Saga people know, and as other students know, John Allegro knew, the women were in charge from the time of the most primordial moments. This is one of the knowledges they learned from the Nephilim, was the use of herbs and mendicants. They were the first. They were the first charters of the sky. By the way, the first women were the first astronomers, and women were the first permaculture, horticulture, and herbalists. This has been openly accepted by feminist writers and has been proven 100%, right?
So pharmakia, that's where it really comes from.
Right. Especially the poppy, but then the Amanita muscara, right? Any drug that you can think of was used by them and certainly done at certain times of the day and night, rituals, right? And these potions became part of it. So this was another way that they empowered themselves, and it's a key device right up to today. It is sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And the drug trade is another one that leads you in the right direction, back to the female cults. They controlled the poppy. They controlled the opium. They controlled the rites and initiations in which it was administered in these agape festivals, because it was mixed with menstrual blood, which they call starfire. It was mixed with semen. It was mixed with, some pretty horrific stuff. And then this would be given to the acolytes.
So you just went on a rabbit hole. A few things is the great comet. David and I have actually had this conversation in the sense of the Mars Chronicles and everything like that, that of the moon capture theory was this big comet that produced floods and caused earthquakes and shook the earth. There is a time where the Greeks talk about a 360-day calendar. Now we have a 365-day calendar. There's talk of before the moon in the sky. The moon itself, if we look at it symbolically, reflects the sunlight at nighttime. So you have this illusionary light. It conceals the sky and the heavens. So there's this level of deception there. One of the Mesopotamian gods of the moon was Sin. This also derives into Set in ancient Egypt. So, I mean, there's a lot of correlation. And then we can look at the lunar goddesses and their correlation to Venus as well, and the connections to kind of Lucifer in the sense. So I wanted to touch on that, but also it was when you were talking about this, I saw someone comment on it, and they said, "Aren't we going through the Great Reset?"
Yeah,
good damn. One. Who commented on that? That's a good one.
Oh yeah, these are Tsarion's Atonists. I say Atonist only because the solar aspect has been their concealment. So Illuminati, which signals light, the brothers of light, the Exilarchs, or the princes of light, as they call themselves, is a smokescreen for their dark sorcery. and the female cults, come out of that more ancient cauldron, and they control the world. So the moon, all those craters on it, that's caused by the passing comet. Our planet was gouged. Just take away the waters of the Atlantic and the Pacific and take a good look at the damage of the comet, and then think to yourself what it did to the psyche. And I talk about it on the articles. Very important. All Masonic, what are they called? Square boards or checker, the diadems. I can't remember the name right now. Always show you the incoming comet. It's part of Masonic iconography, actually. Very clearly described. George Washington, you'll see it on the site. Pictures of George Washington on the Masonic square, and above his head is the comet. So the comet,
and the tassel as well. The tassel off of the graduation hats is the tail.
The mortarboard.
Yep, the mortarboards. Yep.
Yeah.
Isn't that Shriner stuff too? Shriner symbolism there. Yeah,
you'll find this astral symbolism there, because what we're doing right now is unpacking the symbolism as beloved to them. It's a more specialistic study, but as I said, they have core symbols that you must notice, like the crescent. It's not the moon, it's Venus, etc. And then the checkerboard, the columns. And as you do this, that's how you get in then to the secret stuff that they know without being initiated yourself. But it can be done. It can be done. A study of it will, even an amateur and outsider can make a great deal. Once you focus in on these cardinal symbols that turn the beehive, the net, there's certain beloved symbols that they use all the time. And if you do a thorough research of them, which will take you into all sorts of avenues, then you can actually, you'll be able to then decode when you see their signature. Like I told about those two anecdotes in the Old Testament. You'll be able to read it where other people will, it's just about raising the brazen standard in the desert, and Moses did this and Moses did that, but then a more sophisticated reading of it, or King David dancing around the Ark of the Covenant, that's the symbol drugs, and the agape feasts, it's all code, but one can take one through it and see that, oh my God, at this moment at the base of Sinai, when all the revelry takes place, right? They're telling you something there. This is the cult of the Asherah. When the male god doesn't serve them, the people blindly fall back into the old ways of, we preferred the goddess, it was more fun. And then Moses comes down and breaks the tablets and goes, what do you fuckers think you're doing? We're changing. We're changing from, astrological ages into different ages. You got to leave all this shit behind. And then encoded into that is other stories about the masses being traumatized. The comet's arrival is described right there in the parting of the Red Sea, and all of those fiascos and the coming of the 10 plagues of Israel. Who's going to connect those couple of things? Well, you won't, but Immanuel Velikovsky and Sigmund Freud will. You see, so it's all there, but if you don't have the keys of decipherment, it's just this one big colossal story, and the mythmongers have the last word because you haven't done any of the homework to trace all of these symbols back. And the trouble is that these are this beloved, symbols, but the mythmongers refer to it, but we don't realize that the same thing is happening today. And these Setian atnists are still using light to blind us, still using the logo and emblems of the sun and all the other things we've talked about. If you see it, though, everything in your life has changed. You are different now. Once you initiate yourself into this lore and follow where the trail leads, you're not the same as your neighbors. You're not susceptible to their mind control. And that's why this work has to go out, because it really is a patropaic. It is the way that you can walk in the world and not be, a sucker. Because you're onto it. You're onto the tools that they use to mind control you, right? You are immune then. You have what's called psychic immunity. The only freedom in the world is attitudinal. And this is how you get it.
Boom. Oh my God. That's an epic statement there. When I did the video intro, Josh, I wonder if you know more about this. I found some Michael Aquino stuff. And of course, Michael Aquino, people in this network know, top intelligence insider, very high ranked, and was an open member of the Temple of Set. In fact, I think he founded the American branch or was part of that. And I was just going through some documentaries and some interviews and some photos. And I don't even know who this woman is. I don't know that story too well. I wonder if you did. But in almost every other photograph or interview or presentation where you see him all dressed up, behind him is this woman that's always there.
Xena Shrek, or her also name is Xena LeVay.
No shit.
It was
LaFay.
Anton LaVey's daughter, Xena, who left the Church of Satan, denounced it, and went to the Temple of Set. And she was with Michael Aquino on Oprah and all these other talk shows. She's the one that looks like Taylor Swift. Okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And so she ends up denouncing the Temple of Set and turning to Buddhism in around 2006. But she's still alive, and she would be an amazing person to interview to just get their take on what was really going on, because I guarantee she would probably spill the beans.
Well, and then if you're thinking, and then there's another show that Josh and I got to do, as it's on some research that I've been doing on Christine Chandler's book, Enthralled, which shows the connections between, so that a lot of people think of this only in the Western terms, but they forget about this Eastern Illuminati Michael's talking about, where you now have this creeping up in the sort of Vatican of Tibet, which is run by the Dalai Lama and the Lama cults. And the idea of the non-dualism and there is no good and evil, and all the MK Ultra experiments were actually, they did liaisons with a lot of these Buddhist monks to try to gain access to the tantric Buddhist knowledge of how to control minds through drug use, hypnotism, self-hypnotism. Michael, you did a good article, I'm trying to remember the name of it, covering sort of the nonsense behind that led into the dark side of the New Age movement. And there's nobody better to talk to than you on that, because you lived it. You were there in those days. But there's that Eastern side. And when I found this book by Christine Chandler, she blew my mind with, she was experienced. She went to Tibet and studied, and actually ended up working directly under one of the lamas there. And she just opened up the curtain of the horrors of ritualistic child abuse, of pedophilia, of mind control, of the whole deal. And it was all based around this love and light cover that Michael's alluding to, with the way these activists work, where they hide behind the light, and the evil hides in the houses of light. And so a lot of people from the West were disenchanted with the way Christianity and all the Western religions were going. So they all carted off in the 70s and went over to the East and tried to adopt their customs, not knowing they left one net and jumped right into another one. And now this is coming in. And this led me to her connections to the climate change cult, and the high-ranking members under Al Gore and all these people all go out to this ranch in Colorado every year. I think it's called Baca or something. It's like some kind of ranch. And they all bring these lamas in from Tibet to do these rituals with them there. And one of them is a Canadian, Maurice Strong. Maurice Strong, it's actually his property. And he is he's seen at every single climate summit since the Rio summit. And, they do all these weird ritual seances. They're still doing it with the World Economic Forum. They bring all these witches and weird, Eastern people in, and these meditations and all this crap. And a lot of people don't know that this predator is hiding very deeply there. And I even showed some images of the symbolism that comes from Tantric Buddhism. And this is where you get the OK symbol, a lot of these tantric hand symbols that people think, oh, those are the Illuminati symbols. They come from these Western Masons. No, they're born in the East that has a way more ancient history of a civilization than our Western one does. And so when they come in, and then she connected it to the World Economic Forum. And she showed, if you compare the writings of the Dalai Lama right on his website with the writings of Klaus Schwab, and then you spin over and read King Charles' New Terra Carta, your mind will be blown. And these lamas have been infiltrating centers and creating centers all over America for decades, right under their nose. Meanwhile, they got their target on, oh, it's the Jews or whatever. But you have no idea the ancient evil that has crept in through this. I'm not indicting all Buddhism either. There's great things there. We're talking about the cults that seized control of it and turned it into what it is. Michael, did you have anything on that stuff?
Oh, yeah, there's several things there. But, when the first refugees, these Buddhist enclaves opened up in America, and there are many hundreds. They're crypto-communistic because the Western mind cannot tell a Chinese man from a Tibetan or a Burmese or what have you. So the gates were wide open. You could come in and get grants, and you could be allowed to open a temple. That is why the FBI discovered temple after temple in America filled with weapons and guns and machine guns and you know, all the paraphernalia. There were batteries. It's been discovered time after time after time. That was one way that the communists, by pretending to be Buddhist monks, it was very easy to do from them, that was child's play, you know, got into the West. And it's been whistleblown on several programs that this is the case. Extraordinary, actually. Then the more sinister side is that these Eastern cults are some of the darkest things that have ever existed because they are Gnostic. They're just world-hating, world-denying, you know, branches of a very wide, large Gnostic cult that spread into the West, or was brought into the West by very sinister individuals. One would be this Nicholas Roerich, the artist, right? And we've talked about this a lot. Another one would be Bulwer Lytton, right? We've got, in fact, in my program, the Thule Society, it's on Enslaved, the Thule Society. You'll hear me talk about how all of this took place, right? And so
because the Nazis were into this shit too, eh?
Right. Your Karl Haushofer is another one of the top names here. Rudolf von Sabbatendorf, who lived in Turkey, brought in Grand Orient Freemasonry, Turkish style, where some of the largest Gaonim, you know, when I told you that the Gaonim moved back into the West, they head for Turkey, the Ottoman Empire, and they set themselves up in Thessalonica and Salonika. So there's another tie-in there, and we've done programs on that, you know, and we've even done a program called the Eastern Illuminati. Now, these are things that average researchers have never even looked into, but it's very, very important. So, yes, the Eastern connection is key to understanding the rise of the New Age movement. And the article you spoke about that goes into this is called Stilling the Mind. It's right there on the Michael Tsarion website under articles, Stilling the Mind. Read it and weep, right? Because it tells you about this monstrous stuff. And you're right, I was up close to all of this horror, you know, and lucky to extract myself from it. But what a bunch of nonsense. But it entered into the West as one wing of the great serpent, the one wing of the great dragon, to try and soften up affluent, middle-class Oprah types, you know, to slowly massage them into techniques of auto-hypnotism to make omelets of their fucking minds, so that from the other direction can come in other pestilences and you're just all too gaga. You're sitting with your rolling your beads and being all charitable and holy, while evil enters in from another angle, you know. So yes, the story of the Eastern sects and cults, they're nothing but sects and cults teaching the techniques of auto-hypnotism as another methodology of taking the Western mind, you know, and turning it into chewing gum.
Incredible.
Well, you take the cult and you separate them in the sects, right? And sex just happens to be linguistically the same word as sex and sex, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Look at the 60s. You took a bunch of, remember I said that the youth, we talked earlier about how the modern youth right now are in peril. Wasn't that the same story in the 60s when the modern youth of that time was in peril? Mm-hmm. And they're the gormless twats who followed the Beatles over to, you know, the Maharishi and got all interested in this stuff. And then they mobilized. They realized, oh my God, look at America. And when Swami Vivekananda, the very first to bring Eastern teachings, first one allowed in to do public seminars and teachings, he said, he's opened his line saying, sisters of the world. He didn't even address the men.
Well, it's
didn't
interesting.
Even say brother. Didn't say brothers and sisters here gathered. He says sisters of the world. I think.
Go ahead, Michael. Sorry.
You know, you don't have to go much further than that. If
well,
you know what you know.
Yeah, you have Jitta Krishnamurti, who was raised by the Theosophists as their messianic figure, and then denounced them. And in the 60s, comes to the United States and completely turns the table. Like, he says things like, if you understood what people in religious practices really believe, you would be astonished, right? And he basically says he's not a nihilist in any way, shape, or form, but he says is just look within yourself for the answers. Is really his message, is that God is all around you, totality, absolutism, that God is all things, and that nobody's going to provide that for you. But he came from this kind of theosophist, but Eastern kind of derelict teaching. And he denounced it hardcore because he said that they have an agenda and their agenda is evil.
Absolutely, he did so. And he called them on their biggest mythologies, totally devastated it.
Yep.
And his work has been misinterpreted again because of this, because of what he did, But he can't be compared to these evil arcs, these towel heads who came over and they just looked at the Western youth as a bunch of sheep ready for the slaughter. They really did.
They still do.
It's a huge subject.
Yep.
And it's all tied. This is what we're trying to show you guys. Hopefully we've gone through literally just the Reader's Digest, like caption version of all of this research, even though it's so detailed. And Michael brought up so many sources. I've been doing interviews with you, Michael, since probably 2009, 2010. We've been talking about these on different levels. And I got to just say, I'm not trying to blow smoke, but I've been researching this since probably about, it's probably been 20 years. I'm 40 now, Jesus. And I've never met someone that can still consistently blow my mind with the level of detail that I've never heard before. Like, I talk to Michael every week on Unslaved. I read as much as I can, and I still am blown away by things. I still learn things in these conversations. And what it does is it shows there's a passion there. There's a deep passion that you have that I share in my way, and Josh shares in, and many of our listeners here share in, which is that passion for truth. But what I think a lot of people start the journey towards truth with is that they like the idea of it. It's the idea of it to go, yeah, I want to be correct and right, and I instinctually know that's good. But when you find out that the truth is not ponies and rainbows, the truth is the kiosk of uncomfortable truths is completely vacant, while the kiosk for comfortable lies has lineups around the block. And that kiosk of people saying comfortable lies is where I want to go are the ones that are championing, I want the truth. But do you really want the truth? And when you came out with some of the theories and the way you delivered it was very challenging for a lot of people. To me, it was a representation of the very archetype of truth itself, which comes with the sword, as it says in the Bible, not the lamb, and it comes with it's a direct confrontation to the ego. It's a direct confrontation to preconceived notions and installed belief systems that you've been raised with. And then you have to develop the mind to be able to have nuance. We were just talking about this recently, like the ability to have nuance, the ability to think about multiple theories at once while not fully adopting them just yet, but just sort of looking at them as options and being oriented towards the truth rather than just latching onto one little puzzle piece and going, that's it, that's the end, that's the truth, that's the hill I'm dying on. And that nuance is really missing from our own community. We don't really have a lot of that. It's like people listen to a couple guys, read a couple books, and they're just, that's the hill I'm dying on. I'm done the research. Every interview with you is very refreshing because, man, you got something new all the time. And I think that comes from that spirit of nuance and truth. And you really care about it, even if it is uncomfortable. And I think that's the attitude that we need moving forward.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And we need also the platforms to get it out. And you can't get that out if people are coming from a dogmatic point of view. I've done this not because I thought it was controversial, but it's find it interesting. The same spirit that I started with in the 80s continued. And my respect for the predecessors, we mentioned John Allegro and, others, my respect for the work that they did under even greater pressure than we are under, is always constantly on my mind, actually. My motivation is mostly to make sure that people and you can prove this, go to my Astrotheology's own site or anything, you'll see nothing but citations of these Alexander Hislops, and others, these great Christian writers and others, the Tony Bushbys, the Lawrence Gardners. Not that all my information just comes one-on-one from them. I've cognated, I've put it through the little gray cells myself to help synthesize it and also to show some of them have got major errors. Like there's lots of people who've written about this pharmacopoeia cult, and and the pharmacopoeia. None of them mention the role of women. You see, so there's always something that they're missing. Lots of people have written on Akhenaten, and they don't get it, that his cult passed into female hands later on. So every writer out there has their weaknesses. And so all I do is I save other people the 30 years of research by reading their work and then trying to, a little bit respectfully though, footnote and highlight a particular area, that the author missed. And one thing they often miss is that these groups that we're talking about, the Black Lodge, or as you said, the Black Nobility, they've all had rivalries within. They've had breakaway sects, they've had tremendous infighting, and that's often missed by people, because it's hard to track. But the Hospitallers and the Templars, one could go on. There's a lot of breakage away. There's a lot of inner disputes that have taken place. And often in the chaos and the rubble of those wars comes stuff we can use, right? Those are moments when they maybe raise their head above the lineman of history and we go, oh, what's that? Like in the 6th century in France, what was her name? The Queen Brunhilde nearly brought the whole of the civilization, the Merovingian queen, Visigoth queen, had rivalries with another queen and nearly brought the whole of Europe to a standstill just because of their fucking bickering. Killed off about half a dozen Merovingian kings, slaughtered their own children, this kind of thing. The power of women. But this was a moment when there was this rivalry. And if you're looking at it objectively, you can say, wow, look at the power there. Same thing happened in other instances as well.
Well, isn't that what's happening right now is we have these various different factions, and what we're seeing on the ground level of the unveiling of the Great Reset and of the virus and or the bioweapon, however we want to look at it, the political destabilization, the economic destabilization, isn't this really these factions all rising up and having the secret behind the scenes war, trying to gain power and control over the resources of the planet before all of this occurs?
It is that. And we did a show that's relevant to that question called The Dying Conspiracy. And the theory of that, the theory proposed in that, again, don't believe me, right? Just it's a theory, is that the world conspiracy is in inept hands right now. Whereas prior to the first half of the 20th century, it was in very expert hands. But the old guard died off. We can fight over the year when, but say since the 1950s or whatever, the old guard died off. You don't have your Cecil Rhodes anymore, and you don't have your Lord Kitcheners anymore, So the new brats that came in to rule the system in the place of their fathers are fucking cuckoo, and they're inept at running the machine. So a lot of the chaos that you're seeing is because they've lost control. They're out of control and they're nosediving. We need to know this too. And the one go-to that they still maintain control over us while the whole thing is out of control. What does that button do? Right? They're not reining this beast in anymore as well as they did, and that also accounts for some of the fallout. And slightly, I'm not a big believer in awakening or global awakenings or anything, but the little bit of more people that are aware of what's going on, I do concede there are some. That's also happening because the loss of control upstairs. But the one thing that they still maintain is fear. Right? So our modern age is an age of anxiety and also fear, because fear is the mind killer. And as long as they can generate, well, this is going to be an AI controlled grid. This is going to be this is going to be that, or the environment and the Chinese and the Russians, and Ukraine, and they will do anything they can do to put fear into your individual mind so that you're paralyzed. Or the money system is going to go down. You'll have a credit card. You'll be, and all of this is potentially true. But there's an equal case for the possibility of bringing those things to bear, as much as there is the theory that they can be put in place. But what the average human being needs to do is to realize that as you're listening to Big Brother tell you about all the horrors, or these agents, these Gerald Celente types, anybody telling you about the crash and just look objectively at the dispensing of fear and trauma. And this particular time is bad for that, since, the Trump era and the attacks against Mr. Trump Sure, but don't forget that's just a little ramping up of what they've been doing since Eisenhower and before, right? This is an old agenda. It's just a little bit more maximized now and out of control. They've unleashed the anarchists, as the alleged statement of Albert Pike said, right? Okay, but don't restrict that to the last 5 years. That's madness. These people have dispensed fear for centuries. It's one of the old Orwellian, techniques. So then think about it and say, am I completely paralyzed, by the black helicopters and the satellites and the AI world that's coming and coming? And wait a minute, stop! Isn't fear the number one way that the Black Lodge controls me? Not through some credit card chip and a microchip and baby. Yeah. All the way along your fear of those things, and I'm not saying to not rationally be objectively aware of these potential dangers, but anyone who studied the Brotherhood for 5 minutes properly and sincerely knows that it is through the fear that they generate within me that they not only feed off, but control us all. So it's psychic now. It's psychological now. Sure, they may bring in they may have black helicopters right over my fucking house. But that's not what they're feeding off. They never have. And when a little bit of time in history when they did, they scrapped it. They went, that doesn't work because people will soon free themselves of that. The one thing you can't ever free yourself from is the generation of psychic fear and the feeling of we're fucked, we're done. And so they manufacture all sorts of Dr. Strangelove Frankensteinian stories about the world to come. And you just go, well, that's it. We'll be immobilized. I'll have a band or my cell phone and they'll know where I am and I won't be able to move and I won't be able to do it. And it's all probable. And all the time, the victim never realizes I'm walking with fear. Fear's got me.
Right.
And that is the key number one way that any demagogue controls your fucking ass. But now to free myself from it, it's an invisible enemy. The other stuff, at least, maybe I can do something about that or move to the country or, so the human race might rise up and might. But while I'm waiting for that, I'm drowning in psychological terror. That is the control mechanism. That is the control mechanism. The fear is the mind killer. And that I just can't get across to people. Just doesn't sink in to the people in this movement at all. They're so caught up in the data and the fear. They're caught up in the fear. I see why and everything, but psychologically speaking, the one thing that goads you more into their new world order is fear, because that makes you impotent. That makes you, totally incapacitated.
I hope everybody heard that. That is just, it sunk into me. If it didn't sink in anybody else, I know it does for Josh. Fear is the mind killer. It's their number one weapon. They've been at it for thousands of years. They understand how you tick. They have the manuals on the desk right now at all times for every advertisement, every Super Bowl halftime show, every Grammys performance. They know how to bring out the worst of the worst to keep you hopeless. If they can make you feel not fear, and what's the cousin of fear? Despair, right? The black pilled. Bless. Look, the real alpha type, you've said it many times, Michael, and you're an example of it, is they do it even if they feel afraid. That's not part of the way they register. They learn how to develop the courage to stand even if they know it's hopeless. You got 300 Spartans rising up against millions. You got 7 samurai or 7 minute. We've got plenty of examples of this, of the one against the many, and actually winning simply because they addressed their own inner psychic fear that they had. And think about it. What do the bullies in your high school do? They're not as big and scary as they pretend to be. They're all the smallest little men in the room. But they are really good at the costumes, aren't they? And aren't we living in a world of costumes? And aren't those costumes designed, yes, to predate on your children and to do all these things? But deep down, I've said it a few times now, they don't care what it is specifically you're afraid of, as long as you feel that current of energy that they absolutely do feed off of and generate their power from. So that means there's the solution. This can kind of be where we wrap. The solution to get out of this matrix is to go within and address that fear on your individual level. And what better way to address fear than to address the unknown? Because people are afraid of what they don't know. And this is why when you follow the path of knowledge of the truth, be it uncomfortable or not, in fact, you're addressing your fear head on, right?
Yes, and you must rationally support what we've been talking about by observing that every decade there is a new rug pulling. Back in the 50s, it was the Soviet threat and the atomic bomb. Some nutter is going to push the button. And do you realize the effect that that had on the youth and everybody else in the Western world? We're all going to die in a big Holocaust. In the 70s, they wheeled out the unions in Britain, I'm thinking here, with the unions, Thatcher era, and the want and the mass strikes to pull the rug. Then in the 80s, they have another version. You see the oil crisis with Shah of Iran dethroned and whatever, or the Palestinian-Israel connection, Then every decade, so you can observe what we're talking about and see, my God, this is orchestrated. Now it's this, but yesterday it was that. And they can turn this Rubik's Cube whatever way they want, because they know that as long as they can control, they have one leash for a million necks. Try to find, and that's fear. It really is. Now, that doesn't mean that we cancel that by I'm not going to think about it then, and it's ponies and rainbow. I didn't say that. I said just observe your enemy and what they're doing. That's all you need to do. You don't swing over to another sort of ghastly denial or, pretend it doesn't exist. You must study it scientifically. Here is a phenomena that's taking place. I understand how the controllers do it. I'm going to try and immunize myself against it, so that even if I'm watching a Tucker Carlson or even several other well-meaning types, I'm seeing that they're without them maybe even knowing it, they're generating paralyzing doses of fear. So and then I must make the personal decision of what I'm going to do about that. Do I turn off all of it and go my own way and read more and study more and lower the level of fear so I can come back to a bit of science? I'm not there to teach anybody what to do about this. Each person must take this up. Or just like I say with subliminal stuff to, anyone listening, once you know it's there, you know it's there. So immunity starts just by knowing that that phenomena is there and plugging it in and you go, I'm immune to it because I see what they're doing over there. And this is pretty much the same way. What you later decide to do, is your own affair. And that's beautiful. I'm not going to violate a person's ultimate freedom by telling them what to do or negating what they are doing. I'm just saying, notice that this phenomena is there and even exists in some well-meaning people who are trying to shake you awake. But at the same time, they may be, adding fuel to the fire of the fear and anxiety that is really paralyzing people, moving towards going and getting pharmaceuticals, moving into nonsense like Buddhism, and non-dualism. And, all of this is generated out of fear and the need to just block out reality. Well, they don't need fucking implants then, do they? Work it out. You are walking to them. You're saying, chain me. I'm already paralyzed with fear. They don't need to incarcerate you or doing anything else. You become your own victim. That's when they really get an orgasm. They feed off that fear. They literally actually feed off the fear. The dark side feeds off your fear. So stoking the fire to try and get you to be inflamed is really their methodology of the black sorcerers. The more fear this planet generates, the more you're giving them, inoculations, and the more that you're providing them this key nutrient. And I'm afraid this is a very, very tough message because, it begs the question of then, how do you escape it yourself and how does the courageous alpha person, move from that point on? Well, that's it. That's the point. This is where we need to go. We are evolving toward, finding out how to run culture better as we speak. That we're part of a greater movement, a kind of a Hegelian movement toward a greater understanding of how evil works. This is what this is all about, is discovering the ways of evil, the lineaments of it, the anatomy of it, so that we can do something about it. I'm not the expert. I know what I know, but, you got to liaise with the human race, realize that they're mostly dumbed down, like we've been discussing, and try to find some key solutions, Maybe only a few people will be able to implement it. So what? That's always been the case. But they're very powerful tools. So never get pessimistic, because the tools that we're offering are very, very powerful once they're in the right hands. But the general rule is that these people feed off your fear. They can see you coming. you know, and if you're in this level, if you're in that level of pathological fear, you're already dead. They've already won. You can be walking around the sun with a big Prozac smile on your face, but they've already won the day. You're no threat to them at all.
Well said, Michael. My final comment here is kind of following these guys. Is I've found this out a long time ago, and I've used this in a lot of my discussions, and I call it the moral of every Scooby. I call it this moral of the story for Scooby-Doo. Is we all remember Scooby-Doo when we were younger, and that every Scooby-Doo episode taught us a certain lesson about life or whatever it was. But there was an underlining moral that was being taught in every single Scooby-Doo episode. And if you remember, at the end of every episode, Scooby-Doo go and they take the mask off of the monster, the alien, or the ghost, or whatever it was, and underneath was a human being. And then the fear went away. And the moral here is that every monster, every scary thing in life, everything that comes from fear is nothing more than a human being in a mask. And if you take off the mask, you disempower it, right? So this is a metaphor for fear, that everything in the world that is you are fearful of is simply things that have not been defined. Once you take the mask off of that fear, you define what that thing is, or you give it meaning. You disempower it and empower yourself with the knowledge of what it is and remove the fear. And that's what I learned from Scooby-Doo. So that's what I put out to everybody out there is just disempower fear. Go out there and unmask it. Learn as much as you can about the topics and the subjects. Research as deep as you can possibly go. Don't find yourself going down the rabbit hole after rabbit hole of unsubstantiation, but instead follow the people who have came before, who have provided the research, provided the references, like Michael here. Go in and deep dive. And here's the beautiful thing is that you can go to the back of his books and you can find the references where he got it from. You can go to those books. You can find the references where they got it from. And this is a source of validation of this information when you see centuries upon centuries of validation of this information that has been hidden from you. And what this does is it removes the veil of fear and empowers you with the knowledge. And it's, truth is never easy. Truth is not something that's going to taste good as it's going down. But the thing is it's the truth. And the question is are you going to be better when you know it, or is it better for you not to know it? And that's the step that we're all walking into right now, this day in life, with this changing environment that's happening on this planet right now.
And so right. And I do provide links under almost all the relevant pages on the websites for that very purpose. But my work is distinguished because, remember, 95% of our history is prehistory. Mm-hmm. What we call the modern, I don't know, from Egypt time, Greece, is so small compared to prehistory. What we call Egypt already is 3 times longer than every epoch from Egypt to now. 3 times longer it goes back, just the history of Egypt alone. So it's seen rise, it's seen fall, it's seen cults, rivalry, it's seen desecration. So the study's distinguished by, if you want to understand today's world, you've got to, study the prehistory. So that's what I think is where a lot of people lose interest. They want quick, easy fixes, something they can understand. But at the same time, they love fiction, i.e. video games, Game of Thrones, right? From the right brain, they're as receptive as hell, but they block it when it comes to conspiracy research. Suddenly it's left brain again, and that's all kooky stuff. But you spend your whole day immersed in, from the right brain point of view, the fictional rendering of secrets. Like, we mentioned the movies, the positive movies, the great shows, sitcoms. We've learned so much from them, and that's all right brain communicated in a fictional way where prehistory is presented, and we love it. There's numerous examples of this, like, Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, and on we could go. You mentioned the 300 earlier on. If that wasn't an interest to people, there'd be like 2 views. They're all thumbs down. What are we wasting time watching this shit for? Right? Well, so the point is made, but the cognitive dissonance is there, because if you say, these myths are fact, or I treat them like fact, they go, you're a kook. And you're not going to change that. I'm not trying to change that. Right? I'm just pointing it out that is the case, that you have this cognitive dissonance where if it's presented in a fictional way, to your right brain, you go, I just love that. I totally am passionate about that. I love the Dungeons and Dragons, or I love dressing up as a knight. I love, my kids, we go down and we do that. Right. But if I take the same paradigms and insert them as fact, you block it. So again, it's psychology. It is very much based in deconstructing these veils of illusion, as well as the fear. But guys, it's been brilliant. We've covered a lot of ground. And again, there's no final answer. We're still evolving and still understanding this. It goes into lots of different elements that people can discover, But thanks for giving me the time to share with you. Again, this is about only the third, interview I've ever done in the last 10 years or more on the female Illuminati. So go figure, right? But again, big thanks to all of you for putting this on. I really appreciate it.
Oh, Michael, it's our honor and pleasure. I've been wanting to get you on a platform like this for a while. And thanks to you, your research has literally changed my life in many ways. And your contribution should never go ignored. And also your contribution to helping to raise up those who've been lost in history. Just a big thank you to that. And this was top shelf. I thoroughly enjoyed from both of you. You're both on point. I feel great. I hope the audience feels great here. We aren't giving up here on this platform or any other. We are going to become, the warriors for truth, freedom, and justice. And I believe it's going to win out in the end because, this is beyond any of us in some ways, but it's your life and your choices now are within your control. So let's move on and go win this battle. And I want to thank you all. And I just want to close really quick. I have one final sponsor I don't want to forget before we go. And just letting you guys know also, we're really close to the latest Great American Restoration Tour happening in Chandler, Arizona. It's a Badlands event. Josh is going to be there speaking. This is happening April 20th to 23rd. You want to make sure you get your in-person virtual tickets at badlandsmedia.tv. And big shout out to Furman Generators. They're the main sponsor for the event and this network. They're portable, versatile, durable, dependable, and user-friendly. And make sure you get your backup generators. You can go to FurmanPowerEquipment.com. Use the discount code Badlands. Let me just quickly show you their image here. You get 17% off. I think they're even running greater deals than that. So go check them out, guys. Thank you all. And we'll have to do this again sometime. And with that, we'll sign off. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much for joining us, and don't forget to hit the thumbs up on this video. And a special thank you to all of our advertising partners. Please remember to shift your dollars to support those businesses that support Badlands Media. And if you're interested in advertising with Badlands yourself, reach out to Kitty Gillespie. Her email is ads.badlandsmedia@proton.me. That's ads.badlandsmedia@proton.me.